It begins as a spark, a sudden flash of heat behind the eyes. Perhaps a car cuts you off in traffic, its metal shell a hair's breadth from yours, and in that split second, the world contracts. Your heart hammers against your ribs. A frantic drumbeat. Your hands tighten on the steering wheel. Knuckles, white. A hot wave floods your chest, rising into your throat, and a red mist seems to tint the edges of your vision. Or maybe it's a quiet moment, a conversation with someone you care about, and a single sentence, sharp and unexpected, lands like a stone. The heat is different then. A cold fire in the pit of your stomach, a tightening in your jaw. The mind begins to race, replaying the words, building a case, preparing a defense, or a counterattack. This experience, in all its shades and temperatures, is profoundly human. It is a primal, biological inheritance, a storm system hardwired into our being. But in the relentless pace of our modern world, these storms are no longer occasional weather events. They have become the climate. We live in a constant downpour of stimulation, a barrage of notifications, deadlines, social pressures, and digital confrontations. The triggers are everywhere, a relentless current pulling us into a familiar, exhausting cycle, a spark, an explosion of feeling, and then the aftermath, the lingering smoke of regret, resentment, or a quiet, simmering bitterness. We feel like puppets, our strings pulled by external events and internal chemical tides, dancing to a tune of agitation we did not choose. We promise ourselves we will be different next time, more patient, more controlled. Yet the storm arrives again, and we are swept away. Once more, but what if there was another way to exist within this storm? What if you could stand in the very same rain, to feel the same winds blow, and not be carried off by the flood? Imagine, for a moment, a monk on a quiet mountain path. An angry villager confronts him, shouting insults, projecting all his own misery onto the calm figure. The monk does not flinch, does not argue, does not absorb the poison being offered. He remains still, present, unshaken. This is not weakness. It is not apathy or suppression. It is the result of a profound inner strength, a mastery of the mind honed through dedicated practice. This is the wisdom of non-reaction, and this wisdom is not an exotic relic from a distant land, reserved only for those in monastic robes. It is a practical technology of the mind, a set of tools available to every single one of us. This journey we are about to take is an exploration of those tools, a deep dive into the Buddhist understanding of anger, not as a path of religious conversion, but as a practical guide to reclaiming our own inner peace, not by changing the chaotic world outside, but by mastering the world within. Of all the teachings on anger, one story stands out, simple in its telling, but bottomless in its wisdom. It forms the very foundation for understanding a monk's response, not as a complex doctrine, but as a profound and simple truth. Imagine a grove of trees, the air warm and still, dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves onto a gathering of people. They sit in silence, their attention focused on one man, the Buddha, whose presence exudes a palpable sense of peace. The atmosphere is one of deep listening, of quiet contemplation, into this sanctuary of stillness, a man storms in. He is a Brahmin, a man of high caste and learning, and his face is a mask of fury. He has heard of this teacher who challenges the old ways, who speaks of a path to liberation that is open to all, regardless of birth or status. He sees this teaching as a threat, an insult to his tradition, and he has come to confront the source of this disruption. He plants his feet firmly before the seated Buddha and unleashes a torrent of abuse. He does not hold back. He uses the coarsest language, the most vicious insults he can summon. He attacks the Buddha's character, his teachings, his followers. He calls him a charlatan, a fool, a corrupter of youth. The words are designed to wound, to provoke, to shatter the serene atmosphere and expose the teacher as a fraud. The disciples seated nearby begin to shift uncomfortably. They feel the sting of the words, the injustice of the attack. They feel a protective anger rising on behalf of their teacher. But the Buddha himself does not move. He does not frown. He does not clench his fist. He simply sits, his gaze calm, and he listens. He listens with the same focused attention he would give to a bird singing or the wind rustling the leaves. He receives the sounds, the vibrations in the air, but he does not absorb the poison they carry. The man continues his tirade, his voice growing hoarse, his energy starting to wane in the face of this unshakable calm. It is like shouting at a mountain, like trying to punch the ocean. The lack of reaction from his target is more infuriating than any counter-argument could ever be. Finally, sputtering, he runs out of words. His anger exhausted, he stands there, panting. In the deafening silence that follows his outburst, the air hangs heavy with the residue of his hate. Only then, after the storm has completely passed, does the Buddha speak. His voice is gentle, without a trace of resentment. He looks at the man and asks a simple question. "My friend," he says, "do you sometimes have guests visit you in your home?" The man, taken aback by the disarming and seemingly irrelevant question, nods reluctantly. "Yes," he mutters. The Buddha continues, "And when your guests come, do you sometimes prepare food and gifts for them?" The man nods again, confused. "And what if?" the Buddha asks, his voice still soft. "You offer a gift to your guest, but your guest politely declines to accept it. To whom, then, does that gift belong?" The Brahmin is silent for a moment, the logic of the question sinking in. "Well," he says, "if they do not accept it, then the gift still belongs to me." The Buddha smiles, a gentle, knowing smile. "Exactly so, my friend," he says. "For the past hour, you have been offering me a gift. You have offered me the gift of your anger, your insults, your negativity. I have chosen not to accept it." With that, the profound truth of the encounter settles over the grove. The anger, the hatred, the vitriol, it was all a package, an offering, and by simply not taking it, by refusing delivery, the Buddha left the package in the hands of the one who brought it. The Brahmin stood there, stunned, holding his own unwanted gift of bitterness. In that moment, he understood more than 1,000 lectures could have taught him. This story is the master key It reframes the entire dynamic of anger and insult. We are culturally conditioned to believe that if someone is angry at us, we are automatically involved. We feel an obligation to react, to defend our honor, to correct the record, to fight back. We see the interaction as a transaction that has already taken place. But this teaching reveals the hidden step in the process, the moment of acceptance. An insult is not a weapon that strikes you directly. It is a gift that is held out to you. Criticism is not a verdict that is passed upon you. It is an offering laid at your feet. The negativity of another person is their own internal energy, which they are attempting to outsource, to give away, so that they might feel a moment of relief from their own suffering. Think about the physical reality of a gift. If someone tries to hand you a box, your hands must physically reach out and grasp it for the transfer to be complete. If you keep your hands at your sides, the other person is simply left standing there, holding the box. It is their box. It is their problem. The same is true on a psychological level. When that angry email lands in your inbox, filled with accusations and stress, it is a digital box being offered to you when you immediately feel the surge of defensive anger, when you begin furiously typing a reply in your head, when your heart rate quickens. You have, in that moment, reached out your hands and taken the box. You have accepted the gift of their stress. It is now your stress. When a stranger in a comment section leaves a hateful message, they are offering you a small, toxic package of their own anonymity-fueled misery. When you allow that comment to burrow into your mind, to spoil your mood, to make you question yourself, you have signed for the delivery. You have accepted their gift. The space where this choice happens is your own mind. It is a sacred, sovereign territory. No one can force you to feel angry. No one can compel you to accept their bitterness. They can create sounds with their mouth. They can arrange pixels on a screen. But the final act of translation, the act of turning those external stimuli into your own internal emotional state, is an inside job, and you are the one in charge. The practice of mindfulness is the practice of becoming a conscious gatekeeper of this space. It means that when the gift arrives, you don't have to immediately react. You can pause. You can observe. You can see the offering for what it is. You can look at the person offering it and, with a sense of clarity, recognize that the package they are holding contains their own pain, their own frustration, their own confusion. You can see this without judgment and without condemnation. And in that moment of seeing clearly, you can make a conscious choice. You can say, silently, to yourself, I see that you are offering me this gift of anger. I see that it is heavy. I understand that you wish for me to take it from you, but I choose not to. I will let you keep it. This is not a passive act. It is an act of immense power and self-respect. It is the wisdom of not reacting. You are not ignoring the person, nor are you suppressing your own potential feelings. You are simply refusing to take ownership of an emotional burden that does not belong to you. The energy they expended remains their own. The poison they tried to serve remains in their cup. You remain free, unburdened, and at peace. Not because the world around you has become peaceful, but because you have decided to protect the peace within your own borders. This is the first, most fundamental lesson from a monk's response to anger. Before you can manage it, before you can transform it, you must first realize that you don't have to pick it up in the first place. This choice, This refusal to accept the unwholesome gift is the beginning of true emotional freedom. We have learned the first crucial defense against the intrusions of the outside world, the wisdom of not accepting the unwanted gift. By recognizing that another's anger belongs to them, we can choose to leave it in their hands, preserving our own inner peace. This is a profound and liberating realization, but we must be honest with ourselves. We are human, and the wiring of our brains is ancient and deep. There will be times when our guard is down, when we are tired, stressed, or simply caught by surprise. In these moments, despite our best intentions, the spark of anger will leap across the gap. The gift will be in our hands before we even realize we have accepted it. The fire is no longer outside the gates. It is inside, and the first flames are beginning to lick at the edges of our composure. What do we do now? Our conventional response is to engage with the fire on a mental level. We immediately begin a conversation with it. We feed it with stories. We justify it. I have a right to be angry. We tell ourselves. We analyze its cause, blaming the person or situation that triggered it. We project it into the future, imagining the arguments we will have, the retribution we will seek. In doing all of this, we make a fundamental error, an error so subtle and habitual that we don't even notice it. We perform a powerful and dangerous act of identification. We look at this fleeting, energetic event happening inside of us, and we say, I am angry. Consider the power of those 3 words. I am angry. It is a declaration of identity. We are not saying that anger is a guest visiting our house. We are saying that we are the house, and the house is on fire. We are equating the entirety of our being, the vast, complex mystery of our consciousness, with this one temporary emotional state. When we do this, we give the anger absolute power. It becomes the center of our universe. We become its servant, its puppet, compelled to act out its fiery script. But the wisdom traditions offer us a radical alternative, a subtle shift in perception that changes everything. It begins with a simple shift in language, moving from I am angry to there is anger present within me. This may seem like a minor semantic game, but it is the difference between being the storm and being the sky. The sky does not become the storm clouds. The sky is the vast, open space in which the storm clouds gather, rage, and eventually dissipate. The sky remains untouched, unstained, forever calm and clear behind the temporary weather. Our awareness is that sky. Anger is just a weather pattern. To realize this, we must learn to stop talking to the anger and instead learn to listen to it. Not to its stories, not to its justifications, but to its raw, physical language. We must become scientists of our own inner experience, cartographers mapping the physical terrain of the inner storm. Let us try a small experiment. You don't need to conjure a raging fury. Simply recall a moment from today or yesterday when you felt a flicker of irritation. Perhaps someone was driving too slowly in front of you. Perhaps a device didn't work the way it was supposed to. Perhaps you heard a piece of news that was upsetting. Just bring a small, manageable instance of annoyance or frustration to mind. Now, close your eyes if you feel comfortable, and let's go on a journey. Let your awareness become a gentle, curious scanner, moving through the body, not to fix or change anything, but simply to observe, to map. Let's begin with your hands. Without moving them, just bring your attention there. What do you notice? Is there a tightness, a desire to clench them into fists? Do they feel hot or cold? Just notice. With the impartial curiosity of a scientist observing a phenomenon. Now, allow that awareness to travel up your arms and into your shoulders. This is a place where we carry so much tension. Are your shoulders relaxed? Or are they hunched up, creeping towards your ears as if bracing for a blow? Can you feel the subtle strain in the muscles? There is no need to release it. The instruction is not to relax. The instruction is simply to notice, to know, with clarity. There is tension here. Bring your awareness now to your jaw. Is it loose and soft? Or is it clamped shut? Is your tongue pressing against the roof of your mouth or against your teeth? Many of us hold a tremendous amount of anger and unspoken words in the jaw. Just feel the raw sensation of the muscles there. The tightness, the pressure, travel up to your face. Can you feel a sense of heat? A subtle flush on your skin? Is your brow furrowed? Are the tiny muscles around your eyes tight? This is the mask of anger taking shape. See it not as my angry face, but as a collection of muscular contractions and changes in blood flow. Now, go deeper. Bring your attention to your chest and your heart. Can you feel the rhythm of your heartbeat? Is it steady and calm? Or is it a little faster? A little harder than usual? Is there a sense of constriction in your chest, as if a band were tightening around it? This is the engine room of the storm. Observe its activity without judgment. And finally, let your awareness sink into your stomach, your solar plexus. What is the weather like here? Does it feel calm and settled? Or is there a knot, a churning, a feeling of acidic heat? Is it like a clenched fist in your gut? Be with that sensation. By doing this, you have performed a revolutionary act. You have taken the big, scary, monolithic monster called anger, and you have deconstructed it. You have revealed it for what it truly is, a collection of distinct, observable, and most importantly, impersonal, physical sensations. It is heat in the face. It is tension in the shoulders. It is pressure in the jaw. It is a rapid heartbeat. It is a knot in the stomach. When you see it this way, its power over you diminishes dramatically. A monster is terrifying. A collection of temporary body sensations is merely interesting. It is manageable. You are no longer identifying with the anger. You are observing its components. You are the scientist, not the subject. You are the sky, not the storm. A friend of mine, a manager in a high-pressure corporate environment, once told me how this practice saved him. He was in a performance review with his boss, and the boss made a comment that felt deeply unfair and dismissive of his hard work. He said he felt that initial, familiar flash of white-hot rage. His first impulse was to lash out, to list all the reasons his boss was wrong, to burn the bridge then and there. But he had been practicing this kind of mindfulness. So, instead of speaking, he took a silent, internal step back. He didn't follow the furious story in his head. Instead, he dropped his awareness into his body. He told me, it was incredible. I could feel my jaw clamp down so hard. My teeth hurt. I noticed my shoulders were practically touching my earlobes. My stomach felt like I'd swallowed a hot rock. He just stayed there, observing this internal whirlwind of pure sensation. He didn't try to make it go away. He just watched it, and as he watched, the intensity of the sensations began to crest, and then, slowly, to subside. The heat in his face cooled, the knot in his stomach loosened. The story in his head lost its fuel and fizzled out after what was probably only 30 seconds, but felt like an eternity. He was able to look at his boss, not from a place of wounded rage, but from a place of calm clarity. He was able to respond to the criticism constructively, without the destructive fire of his initial reaction. He hadn't suppressed his anger. He had dismantled it. He had mapped its landscape, and in doing so, had robbed it of its power to command him. This is the second step in the wisdom of not reacting. First, we learn not to accept the gift, but when it's already inside, we learn to investigate it, to map its physical territory without judgment. We become the calm, curious witness to the storm. This practice reveals a profound truth. You are not your anger. You are the vast, silent, peaceful awareness that is capable of noticing it. But to remain as that calm witness when the winds are high and the waves are crashing, we need a focal point, something to hold on to so we don't get swept away. We need an anchor in the tempest, and that anchor, as we will now discover, is as close, as constant, and as simple as the air we breathe. We have journeyed inward, becoming cartographers of our own emotional turmoil. We have learned to stand as impartial witnesses, deconstructing the monstrous myth of anger into its constituent parts: the heat, the tension, the pressure. We have seen that these are merely physical sensations, temporary weather patterns passing through the vast sky of our awareness. This is a profound insight, but insight alone can feel fragile when the storm is truly upon us. To observe the storm requires a stable place to stand, a vantage point that is not being tossed and battered by the very winds we are trying to watch. When our body is in a state of alarm, when the fight or flight response has hijacked our nervous system, the mind is a chaotic sea. To ask it to be still and observant at that moment is like asking a sailor to paint a landscape from the deck of a ship in a hurricane. We need something to hold on to. We need an anchor. That anchor is not something you need to acquire. You do not need to buy it or study for years to find it. You have carried it with you every moment of your life. From your first cry to this very breath you are taking now. The anchor is the breath itself. It seems impossibly simple, almost insultingly so. How can something so automatic, so mundane, be the key to taming the primal fire of anger? The secret lies in the breath's unique position as the bridge between our conscious and unconscious worlds, between the mind and the body. Think about it. Most of our bodily functions happen without our consent. We don't decide to beat our heart, to digest our food, to grow our hair. Yet the breath is different. It operates on its own. But we can, at any moment, step in and consciously change its rhythm. I depth, I pass. It is the one vital, automatic process that we can immediately and intentionally control. This makes the breath the ultimate biohacking tool. It is the control lever connecting your intentional, thinking mind to the ancient, reactive animal body. When the mind is agitated, the breath becomes shallow, ragged, and fast. When the mind is at peace, the breath is deep, slow, and gentle. The link is undeniable. But here is the secret. The bridge runs both ways. Just as the mind can alter the breath can alter the mind. By consciously taking command of your breathing, you are sending a direct, undeniable signal back to your brain and body. A message that overrides the initial panic alarm of anger. You are telling your nervous system, despite the apparent threat, we are safe. You can stand down. Let's not just talk about it. Let's experience it. Right now, wherever you are. First, simply bring your attention to your breathing without trying to change it at all. Just notice it. Feel the air entering your nostrils. Is it cool? Feel it leaving your body. Is it warm? Can you feel the gentle rise of your chest? Or the expansion of your belly for just a few seconds? Let your entire universe be this simple, rhythmic sensation. This is mindfulness of breathing in its purest form. Now, let's introduce a gentle intention. On your next inhale, breathe in normally. Then, on the exhale, let it go just a little more slowly, a little more completely than usual. Imagine the exhale is a long, gentle sigh of release. Inhale naturally, and then a long, slow, complete exhale. Don't force it. Don't strain. Just make the out-breath noticeably longer than the in-breath. Try it for a few cycles. Inhale and exhale. Letting go of hurry. Letting go of tension. Inhale and exhale. Feeling your shoulders drop just a fraction. What you are doing is far more than just a relaxation exercise. You are performing a precise neurological intervention. Our nervous system has two main branches. Think of them as a car's gas pedal and brake. When you get angry, your body slams on the gas pedal, the sympathetic nervous system. This is the fight or flight response. It floods you with adrenaline and cortisol. Your heart races. Your muscles tense. Your blood pressure spikes. It's preparing you to battle a saber-toothed tiger. Even if the tiger is just a critical email, the brake pedal is the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest response. It does the opposite. It slows the heart rate, relaxes the muscles, and fosters a sense of calm and well-being. The magic key that helps you manually switch from the gas to the brake is a long, wandering nerve called the vagus nerve. And one of the most effective ways to stimulate this nerve and activate your body's braking system is through a long, slow exhale. So, when you are in the heat of a moment and you intentionally slow down your exhalation, you are not just pretending to be calm. You are actively reaching into the control panel of your own physiology and applying the brakes. You are telling the ancient, panicked part of your brain that there is no tiger, that the battle is not necessary, that it is safe to return to a state of equilibrium. The beautiful thing is, you don't need to believe in any of this for it to work. The body responds to the signal of the breath. Regardless of your philosophical persuasion, there is a timeless story of a great Zen master who was summoned to the court of a notoriously hot-tempered emperor. The emperor was a powerful man, but he was a slave to his own rage. His snap decisions, made in the fire of anger, had cost him allies, resources, and the loyalty of his people. He asked the master for a secret, a mantra, a magical amulet to cure him of his affliction. The master simply bowed and said, "Your Majesty, I have no magic, but I have one piece of instruction. The next time you feel the heat of anger rise, before you speak a single word or issue a single command, You must pause, and in that pause, you must take 3 conscious breaths. For the first breath, feel the air enter your body and say silently to yourself, I am inhaling. As you exhale, say, I am exhaling. For the second breath, follow the entire path of the breath from beginning to end. For the third breath, simply be aware of your whole body as you breathe. The emperor was skeptical, but he agreed to try. A few days later, a general brought him news of a rebellion at the border. The emperor felt the familiar surge of violent rage. He opened his mouth to order a brutal suppression, but he remembered his vow. He closed his mouth, a heroic effort. He took the first breath. I am inhaling. I am exhaling. The fire in his chest still raged. He took the second breath, forcing himself to follow its path. A tiny island of focus in a sea of fury. The rage began to feel less overwhelming. He took the third breath, feeling the solidness of his own body, the ground beneath his throne, and in the space created by those 3 simple breaths, the red mist cleared. He saw not just the problem, but the potential consequences of a rash reaction. He was still the emperor, still powerful, but now his power was tempered with clarity. He was no longer a slave. This is the function of the anchor. An anchor on a ship does not stop the storm. The storm is a force of nature, beyond the ship's control. The waves still rise. The wind still howls. What the anchor does is prevent the ship from being helplessly swept away, from being dashed against the rocks. The breath is your anchor, the frustrating person, the difficult situation that is the storm. Focusing on your breath will not magically make them disappear, but it will hold you fast in the present moment. It will keep your mind from being swept away on the torrent of angry, repetitive thoughts. It keeps you grounded in the reality of your own body, in the here and now, which is the only place you have any real power. It is the practice of coming home to yourself, over and over again, in the middle of chaos. Each conscious breath is a declaration of sovereignty. Each slow exhale is an act of reclaiming your inner territory. This anchor is what allows you to ride out the storm, and in the stillness it creates, in that precious pause between the wave crashing and the ship being pulled, lies the space for wisdom. It is this space, this sacred pause gifted to us by the anchor of the breath, that we will explore next. For within that space lies the very difference between bondage and freedom. We have felt the storm of anger inside our own bodies, mapping its physical terrain of heat and tension. We have found the anchor of the breath, a tool of immense power to hold us steady in the present moment, preventing us from being swept away. This practice of anchoring does more than just calm our nervous system. It performs a kind of magic. It creates a pause, the primary, most profound function of the mindful breath is to insert a sliver of time, a moment of stillness, into the chain of events. And this pause, this space, no matter how brief, is the entire universe. It is the gap between who we are and who we could be. It is the fertile ground where the seed of wisdom, once planted, can finally begin to grow. Within this space, we confront the fundamental choice of our lives, the choice between reaction and response. These 2 words, reaction and response, are often used interchangeably, but in the geography of the inner world, they are poles apart. They represent 2 entirely different ways of being human. A reaction is what a puppet does. When its string is pulled, Its arm jerks up. There is no thought, no choice, no deliberation. The connection between the pull and the jerk is immediate, mechanical, and predictable. A reaction is a knee-jerk reflex, a lightning strike of conditioning. It is the ancient, reptilian part of our brain, the amygdala, taking over. It is a hijacking. When someone insults you and you instantly lash out with a sharper insult, that is a reaction. When you are cut off in traffic and you immediately lay on the horn and feel a surge of rage, that is a reaction. When you receive a critical email and your fingers begin typing a furious defense before you've even finished reading, that is a reaction. There is no space. The stimulus and the reaction are fused together into a single blank, explosive event. In these moments, we are not free. We are automatons, running a pre-installed program written by our past experiences, our fears, and our biological imperatives. A response, on the other hand, is what a master musician does. She hears the notes played by the orchestra. She feels the mood of the room. And then, in a space of creative silence, she chooses what to play next. Her action is not a mechanical reflex. It is a conscious, considered, and creative act. A response is born in the most evolved part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex. It is born of awareness. It considers the context, the consequences, the long-term goals. When someone insults you and you feel the initial sting, but you pause, breathe, and choose to remain silent or to ask a clarifying question from a place of calm, that is a response. When you are cut off in traffic and you feel the flash of adrenaline, but you breathe, relax your grip on the wheel, and create a safe distance, that is a response. When you receive that critical email and you feel the heat rise in your face, but you make the conscious choice to get up, walk away, and come back to it an hour later with a clear head, that is a response. A response is an act of freedom. It is proof that you are no longer a puppet, but the one holding the strings. The great psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, Viktor Frankl, articulated this principle with breathtaking clarity. Frankl endured unimaginable suffering in the Nazi concentration camps, where every shred of human dignity was systematically stripped away. And yet, from the depths of that horror, he discovered an unassailable truth about human nature. He wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." This is not the idle musing of a philosopher in an armchair. This is a testament forged in the most extreme fires of human suffering. What Frankl realized is that the Nazis could control his external world. They could torture his body, starve him, and subject him to every imaginable cruelty. But they could not control that final, sacred space within him. They could provide the stimulus, but he, and he alone, had the power to choose his response. He could choose to descend into hatred and despair, or he could choose to find meaning, to preserve his inner integrity, to comfort another prisoner. That tiny gap, that sacred pause between what was done to him and how he responded, was where his humanity resided. It was his ultimate freedom. This space is our birthright, but for most of us, it has been paved over by years of habit and conditioning. The highway from stimulus to reaction is a well-worn, multi-lane superhighway. The path to a conscious response is an overgrown, barely visible trail in the woods. The entire practice of mindfulness, of not accepting the gift, of mapping the body, of anchoring with the breath has one singular purpose: to begin the work of clearing that trail. It is to turn the superhighway of reaction into a quiet country road, and to transform the overgrown footpath of response into a clear, accessible, and welcoming path. Every time you catch yourself before you snap at a loved one, you are widening that space. Every time you take a breath instead of sending an angry text, you are strengthening that muscle of choice. Every time you notice the tension in your jaw and consciously relax it, you are reclaiming a millimeter of that sacred territory. Let's return to the all-too common example of the frustrating email. The stimulus arrives in your inbox. It's from a colleague, and it feels accusatory, blaming you for a problem you don't think is your fault. The reaction is instantaneous. The amygdala fires. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your system. Your heart rate increases. Your face feels hot. Your mind begins to race, crafting a defensive narrative. The story is one of injustice. How dare they? After all the work I've done, they're trying to make me look bad. The reaction is to fight back, to defend your honor. Your fingers are poised over the keyboard, ready to unleash a point-by-point rebuttal that will escalate the conflict and damage your professional relationship. In this scenario, the space between stimulus and reaction is non-existent. They are one and the same. Now, let's introduce the pause. The email arrives. The exact same stimulus, the exact same initial flash of heat and indignation occurs. But this time, you have been practicing. You notice the heat, you notice the clenching in your stomach, and you remember the anchor. You take one conscious breath. You don't even have to do it perfectly. You just do it. That one breath is the wedge that begins to pry open the space. It's a moment of non-action. In that moment, you make a simple choice. I will not type right now. You push your chair back from the desk. You stand up and walk to the window, feeling your feet on the floor. You look at the sky. You take a few more breaths. You have successfully interrupted the program. You have stepped off the superhighway of reaction. An hour later, you return to your desk. Your nervous system is calm. The story in your head has lost its venomous charge. Now, you can reread the email. Perhaps you see it differently. Perhaps you recognize the stress your colleague is under. Your mind is clear. You can now craft a response. Your response is not about winning or losing. It is about solving the problem. It is calm, clear, professional, and collaborative. You have not just avoided a conflict. You have transformed a potential disaster into an opportunity for constructive communication. You have exercised your freedom. This space, this sacred pause, is the most valuable real estate in your inner world. It is the workshop where you dismantle the automatic reactions of the past and forge the wise responses of your future. It is the silent sanctuary where you transform from a victim of circumstance into the creator of your experience. Cultivating this space is the work of a lifetime, and it is done in the small moments of every single day. But to truly understand the forces working against us, to see why the knee-jerk reaction is so incredibly powerful and seductive, we must now turn our gaze upon the silent, vigilant architect of that reaction. We must meet the tireless guardian of our triggers, the master storyteller who insists that we must react to survive. We must now explore the nature of the ego. We have discovered the sacred pause, that precious space between stimulus and response, where our freedom is born. We have learned that with the anchor of the breath, we can hold ourselves in this space, creating the opportunity to choose a wise response over a knee-jerk reaction. But a powerful question remains. What is the force that so often collapses this space in an instant? What is the inner tyrant that slams the door on wisdom and demands immediate, fiery retribution to understand the root of our reactivity? We must turn our gaze inward and meet the architect of our outrage, the silent, ever-vigilant guardian of our identity. We must come to understand the role of the ego. Now, the word ego comes with a lot of baggage. We often think of it as arrogance or conceit, but in this context, we will look at the ego in a much broader, more neutral way. The ego is not an evil entity that must be destroyed. It is, in its essence, a survival mechanism. It is the story of me. It is the mental construct of a separate, solid self that we have been building since we were children. It is a collage of labels, beliefs, memories, and roles. I am a parent. I am an artist. I am a competent professional. I am a kind person. I am someone who is always on time. These stories are not inherently bad. They help us navigate the world and form a coherent sense of identity. The ego is the internal narrator of our lives, the CEO of me, Incorporated, whose primary job is to protect and promote this character we believe ourselves to be. The problem arises because this CEO is also a micromanager. The ego creates a vast and intricate rulebook for reality. It has a very detailed script for how the world should be, how other people should behave, and most importantly, how we should be treated. Anger, in its most common form, is nothing more than the alarm system that shrieks whenever reality dares to deviate from the ego's script. The anger is not a reaction to the event itself, but a reaction to the violation of the rule. The event is just the evidence. The true crime is the disrespect shown to the ego's authority. Let's examine some of the ego's favorite rules. One of its most fundamental laws is, I deserve to be treated with respect. This sounds perfectly reasonable, but when someone cuts you off in traffic, they have broken this rule. The ego does not see an anonymous driver who is late or distracted. It sees a personal affront. It feels a direct attack on its status. And it screams, they can't do that to me. The anger is a defense of the me who deserves respect. Another core rule is, my time and my plans are important. When you are stuck in a long line, when a meeting runs over, when your computer crashes, this rule has been violated. The impersonal friction of the universe is interpreted by the ego as a personal attack on its agenda. The frustration you feel is the ego's protest against a world that is not conforming to its meticulously planned schedule. Perhaps the most sensitive rule of all is, I am good, competent, and right. When someone criticizes your work, questions your opinion, or proves you wrong, they are not just disagreeing with a point, they are threatening the very foundation of your ego's identity. The ego perceives this as a mortal threat. To be wrong is to be diminished, to be less than, and so, the defense mechanism of anger kicks in not to find the truth, but to protect the story of I am right. We get defensive. We deflect. We attack the other person's credibility. All of this is the ego fighting for its own survival. A beautiful Zen story perfectly illustrates this dynamic. Two monks, one old and one young, were on a long journey. They came to a river that was swollen and raging from heavy rains. On the bank stood a beautiful young woman in fine silks, afraid to cross. Without hesitation, the old monk walked over, lifted the woman onto his shoulders, carried her across the turbulent water, and gently set her down on the other side. He gave a slight bow and continued on his way. The young monk was aghast. He followed his master, his mind in a silent turmoil. For hours, he seethed. He was scandalized. His ego, with its rigid story of what a monk should be, was in agony. The rulebook was clear. Monks are not to touch women. It is a vow of purity. How could his master, a monk respected, so blatantly break such a sacred rule? What would people think for miles and miles? The young monk carried this burden. The anger grew heavier with every step. Finally, as evening approached, he could bear it no longer. He burst out, "Master, I cannot believe what you did back there. We have taken a vow not to touch women. Yet you lifted that woman and carried her in your arms. How could you transgress so carelessly?" The old monk stopped walking and looked at the young man with deep compassion in his eyes. He replied softly, "I put that woman down by the side of the river hours ago. Tell me, brother, are you still carrying her? This story reveals everything. The woman was not the problem. The river was not the problem. Even the broken rule was not the real problem. The source of the suffering was the young monk's rigid identification with his ego story. I am a monk who follows the rules." His anger was a defense of this self-image. The old monk, operating from a place of simple, compassionate response to a human being in need, was free from the prison of his ego's rulebook. He performed an act of kindness, and then he let it go. The young monk, however, clung to the story, and in doing so, he chose to carry a burden of anger for miles. We all do this. We carry around the ghosts of slights, insults, and unmet expectations from yesterday, last week, even last year, because our ego refuses to let them go. So what can we do? The answer is not to declare war on the ego. To fight the ego is just another one of the ego's games. The ego loves a good fight. It reinforces the sense of a me who is fighting. The path of wisdom is far more subtle. It is the path of observation. The practice is to become a curious, compassionate spectator of your own ego. When you feel that familiar flash of anger, instead of immediately looking outward to cast blame, you turn your attention inward and ask a new set of questions. What is the story here? What rule of mine was just broken? What expectation was not met? What part of my identity feels threatened right now? When you ask these questions, you perform a sacred shift. You move from being the character in the play to being the audience watching the play. You are no longer identified with the ego. You are the calm, spacious awareness that notices the ego's antics. You can see your ego puffing up its chest, stamping its feet, and insisting on its own importance. And you can almost smile at it with a kind of parental affection. You can say, "Ah, there you are again, defending the story of me." By seeing the stories as just stories, they begin to lose their absolute power. They are no longer gospel truth. They are just mental habits. You don't have to believe them. You don't have to obey their commands. This is the key to disarming the architect of outrage. You watch its blueprints. You read its scripts. You observe its dramas. And you do it all from a place of quiet, non-judgmental awareness. You realize that you are not the ego. You are the space in which the ego appears. This creates a profound sense of inner freedom. But the ego is a master of holding on. It clings to its grievances and its stories like a shipwrecked sailor clinging to a piece of driftwood. To truly loosen its grip, we must introduce it to a force far greater than itself. A universal truth that dissolves all rigidity and permanence. We must now explore the profound and liberating wisdom of impermanence. We have met the inner architect of our anger, the ego. We have seen how this storyteller, this guardian of our identity, constructs a rigid rulebook for the world and sounds the alarm of outrage whenever reality fails to comply. The ego builds a fortress of me and mine, and its greatest desire is for this fortress to be permanent, for its stories to be timeless, and for its grievances to be carved in stone. It clings to anger because anger reinforces the story of a solid, wronged self. But there is a universal law, a truth so profound and pervasive that it gently and relentlessly dismantles every fortress the ego can build. It is the universal solvent for all rigidity, the gentle antidote to all clinging. This is the wisdom of anicca, the law of impermanence. To embrace impermanence is to align ourselves with the fundamental nature of reality. We live in a culture that worships the permanent. We want eternal youth, timeless monuments, and relationships that never change. We see change as a threat, a loss. But this is like standing on a riverbank and commanding the water to stop flowing. The universe is not a static photograph. It is a dynamic, unending film. Nothing is still. On a cosmic scale, stars are being born in fiery nurseries while others collapse into darkness. Mountains, the very symbols of solidity, are being thrust upwards by tectonic plates, while simultaneously being worn down by wind and rain. Continents drift, coastlines recede. The solid ground beneath our feet is in a state of constant, unimaginably slow transformation. This dance of change is even more apparent in our own bodies. You are not the same physical person you were 10 years ago, or even 1 year ago. Billions of your cells have died and been replaced. Your breath, your heartbeat, your body temperature are all in a state of constant, dynamic flux, maintaining a fragile equilibrium. You are not a static entity. You are a process. You are a river of constantly changing biological matter and energy. Nature is our greatest teacher of this truth. The seasons turn, one gracefully giving way to the next. The mightiest oak tree begins as a tiny acorn and will one day return to the soil. A cloud forms, drifts across the sky, and dissolves into rain, never holding the same shape for more than a moment. Now, let us bring this universal law to the most intimate and often most turbulent aspect of our experience, the landscape of our own minds. If stars and mountains are impermanent, what of a thought, what of a feeling? These are the most fleeting, gossamer-like phenomena in the universe. No single thought has ever lasted. It arises, catches our attention, and dissolves, replaced by the next one. Our moods shift like the weather. Sunny one moment, stormy the next. Joy, sadness, excitement, boredom, they all come and they all go. They are visitors, not residents. And so it is with anger. When we are in the grip of a powerful rage, it feels absolute, It feels like the new, permanent reality. The anger colonizes our entire being, and its story seems like the only truth. It whispers to us, "This is who you are now. You are an angry person. This injustice is unforgivable, and this feeling will never end until justice is served." The wisdom of impermanence allows us to see this for the lie that it is. Anger, no matter how hot it burns, is a temporary weather event. It is a psychobiological storm, a confluence of triggering thoughts, chemical reactions in the body, and learned habits. And like any storm, it has a natural life cycle. It gathers, it peaks, and it passes. It cannot and will not last forever. Think of an ocean. The ocean of your consciousness is vast, deep, and fundamentally peaceful. An external event, the wind of an insult, the current of a frustration can whip up the surface of that ocean into a mighty wave. That wave is anger. It can look huge, powerful, and terrifying. It can feel like it is going to capsize your ship, but that wave is not separate from the ocean. It is made of the exact same water. It is simply the ocean, in a temporary, agitated form. A wise sailor does not fear the wave or hate the wave. He understands it is a temporary expression of the ocean's energy. He knows it will rise, crash upon the shore, and recede back into the vastness from which it came. To identify with the anger is to believe you are the wave. To practice with impermanence is to remember that you are the entire ocean. The most practical way to apply this wisdom is encapsulated in a timeless story from the Middle East. A powerful king, who was prone to wild swings of emotion, summoned his wisest counselors. He said, "I want you to create for me a ring. Engraved upon this ring must be a message that can temper my emotions. When I am in the depths of despair, it must give me hope. When I am puffed up with pride after a great victory, it must bring me back to earth. It must work in all situations. In all times," the sages conferred, and after much thought, they returned to the king and presented him with a simple gold band. The king looked at it and saw inscribed on its surface 4 simple words: "This too shall pass." In these 4 words lies a complete spiritual practice. When the king suffered a bitter defeat and felt the despair that crushes the soul, he would look at his ring and remember, "This too shall pass." And he would find the strength to endure when he won a great battle and was overcome with arrogant pride. He would glance at the ring and remember, "This too shall pass." And he would find a sense of humility. And so it is with our anger. When you feel the heat rising, the jaw clenching, the story of injustice taking hold, you can introduce this sacred mantra into your mind. You can observe the fiery sensations in your body and gently remind yourself, "This feeling of anger, this too shall pass." This is not an act of suppression. You are not telling the anger it is wrong or trying to force it away. You are simply holding it within a larger context of truth. You are putting a frame of wisdom around the raw picture of your emotion. You are giving the wave permission to exist, knowing it will eventually recede. This simple reminder does 2 things. First, it loosens the ego's grip. The ego wants the anger to be a permanent indictment of the other person and a permanent justification of its own righteousness. The phrase, "This too shall pass," directly contradicts the ego's story of permanence. Second, it reduces our fear of the feeling itself. When we secretly believe that a feeling might last forever, we panics, and we do anything to get rid of it, which usually means lashing out. But when we know, with deep certainty, that the feeling is a temporary visitor, we can afford to be patient. We don't have to serve it tea, but we can allow it to sit in the hall for a little while, knowing it will soon be on its way. We can breathe through the intensity, knowing it is the peak of the storm, and that a calm will inevitably follow. To hold on to anger is to try and capture a storm in a jar. It is an exhausting and futile struggle against the nature of reality. To embrace impermanence is to open the window and let the wind blow through. It is to accept that life is a river, and that our emotions are the currents and eddies within it. We cannot stop the flow, but we can learn to navigate it with grace, without capsizing our boat every time we hit a patch of rapids. By seeing our anger as a temporary cloud, we cease to identify with it. We remember that we are the sky, vast and untouched. This practice of letting go, of allowing the storm to pass, brings a profound sense of peace. But what if we could go even further? What if, instead of simply watching the cloud of anger drift away, we could learn to see the suffering that created the cloud in the first place? What if we could transform the energy of the storm into a gentle, nourishing rain of compassion? This is the next, and perhaps most transformative, step on our journey. We have stood on the riverbank of our own minds and watched the turbulent waters of anger flow by, armed with the profound knowledge that this too shall pass. We have learned to not be swept away by the temporary storm, understanding its impermanent nature. This practice brings a great sense of relief, a spaciousness where there was once constriction, but the path of wisdom offers us an even more radical, more transformative possibility. What if, instead of simply allowing the wave of anger to recede, we could learn to understand the forces that created it? What if we could use the very energy of the conflict to cultivate a quality that dissolves anger at its root? This is the journey from passively letting go to actively transforming through compassion. It begins with a revolutionary shift in perspective, learning to see the suffering in the person who has angered you. The foundational premise is simple, yet it challenges the very core of our reactive instincts. It is this: happy, content, peaceful people do not go around causing harm. Actions that spring from a heart full of joy and contentment are naturally kind, generous, and patient. The behaviors that trigger our anger, the sharp criticism, the impatient retort, the act of aggression, the cold indifference are almost invariably the symptoms of a deep inner dis-ease in the other person. They are the clumsy, often unconscious, expressions of their own fear, their own insecurity, their own pain, and their own unmet needs. When someone lashes out in anger, they are, in that moment, suffering. Their hurtful words are not a calculated assault from a place of strength, but a desperate defense from a place of perceived weakness. Their aggression is a shield for their fear. Their arrogance is a mask for their insecurity. When we are confronted with such behavior, our ego's default setting is to make the story entirely about us. We ask, how could they do this to me? What have I done to deserve this? Why am I being treated this way? These questions immediately cast us in the role of the victim and the other person in the role of the villain. It's a simple, dramatic, and deeply unsatisfying script that locks us into a cycle of righteousness and resentment. The practice of compassion invites us to flip the script entirely. It asks us to momentarily set aside our own wounded feelings and ask a completely different, Far more powerful question. What must this person be suffering from to be acting in this way? Let this question sink in. It is a form of spiritual alchemy. The moment you ask it, the entire dynamic of the situation changes. You are no longer the target of an attack. You are the witness to a person's pain. You shift from being a co-star in their drama to being a member of the audience, watching their struggle with a sense of curious, compassionate detachment. When a driver is screaming at you with road rage, instead of seeing a monster, you might see a person who is terrified of being late, whose job is on the line, whose life feels so out of control that the only place they can exert any power is from behind the wheel of a car. When a family member offers a sharp, unsolicited criticism, instead of seeing a personal attack, you might see their own deep-seated insecurity, their own fear of not being good enough, which they are now projecting onto you. This shift in perspective is not about condoning their behavior. This is a crucial distinction. Compassion is not a synonym for being a doormat. It does not mean you must accept abuse, tolerate disrespect, or abandon your boundaries. You can still say no. You can still state your truth. You can still walk away from a toxic situation. The difference is the inner state from which you act. You can set a boundary from a place of clear, calm, self-respecting wisdom, which is constructive, or you can set a boundary from a place of hateful, reactive anger, which is often destructive and merely escalates the conflict. Seeing the suffering in the other person allows you to protect yourself without poisoning yourself with hatred. It allows you to say, "Your behavior is not acceptable, but I see that it comes from your own pain, and I will not allow your pain to become my own." You are freed from the heavy burden of resentment. Perhaps the most powerful illustration of this principle is the terrifying and beautiful story of the Buddha and the serial killer, Angulimala. Angulimala, whose name meant garland of fingers, was a figure of pure dread, a fearsome warrior who had been led astray by a dark teaching. He stalked the forests of the kingdom of Kosala, murdering travelers and cutting off one of their fingers to add to the gruesome necklace he wore. He had 99 fingers. He needed only one more to complete his task. Entire villages were paralyzed with fear. No one dared travel the roads. Hearing of this, the Buddha, against the pleas of his disciples and the local villagers, calmly and deliberately began walking down the very road where Angulimala was known to hunt. Soon enough, Angulimala saw him from a distance, alone. Serene monk. He was delighted. Here was his final victim. He drew his sword and began to run. But a strange thing happened. Though the Buddha was only walking at a normal pace, Angulimala, a trained warrior running at full speed, could not catch up to him. Exhausted, frustrated, and bewildered, he finally shouted from a distance, "Stop, monk, stop!" The Buddha, without breaking his stride, replied with a calm, clear voice that cut through the forest air, "I have stopped. Angulimala, it is you who have not." Angulimala was stunned into silence. "What do you mean?" he demanded. The Buddha turned to face him, his gaze filled not with fear or condemnation, but with an unwavering and profound compassion. "I have stopped," he explained. "I have stopped killing. I have stopped causing harm. I have stopped running from myself. You are the one who is still running, still caught in the endless cycle of violence and suffering." In that moment, The Buddha was not looking at a monster. He was not looking at a garland of fingers or a blood-stained sword. He was looking past the terrifying exterior and seeing the profound suffering that fueled it all: the delusion, the pain, the confusion that had trapped this man in a living hell of his own making. The Buddha's complete lack of fear and the presence of this powerful, unconditional compassion did what no army could do. It shattered Angulimala's defenses. He saw himself for the first time through the Buddha's eyes, not as a fearsome killer, but as a being lost in immense pain. He threw down his sword, fell to his knees, and his transformation began. We will likely never meet an Angulimala, but our daily lives are filled with minor Angulimalas, people who, out of their own smaller pains and delusions, try to cut us with their words, their impatience, and their anger. The rude colleague, the critical stranger, the aggressive driver, they are all wearing their own invisible garlands of suffering. The practice of compassion is the practice of learning to see past the garland to the person who is trapped beneath it. It is the most powerful method for disarming our own anger, because it is impossible to remain truly angry at someone when you are simultaneously feeling compassion for their struggle. The fire of your anger and the water of your compassion cannot coexist in the same space. One will always extinguish the other. This is the alchemy of the heart. You take the leaden weight of your own personal grievance and you transform it into the radiant gold of a compassionate, universal understanding. You are not just freed from your own anger, you are contributing to the healing of the world. But this extension of grace to others is often only half the battle. To complete the circle of peace, we must learn to offer that same grace inward. We must confront the final and often most difficult barrier, our own unwillingness to let go. We must learn the art of forgiveness. We have journeyed outward with our awareness, learning to see the hidden suffering that often motivates the actions of others. This practice of compassion can dissolve anger in a cleansing wave of understanding, freeing us from the chains of conflict. And yet, sometimes, even with this understanding, a bitter residue remains. A part of us may still cling to the hurt, to the profound sense of injustice. The memory of the wound feels raw, and the story of our grievance plays on a loop in our minds. To find complete freedom, we must now turn to the final act of emotional housekeeping, the most misunderstood and yet most liberating practice of all. We must learn the art of forgiveness. In our culture, forgiveness is often seen as a weakness, an act of letting someone off the hook. We believe it is a gift we begrudgingly give to the person who wronged us. The wisdom traditions, however, teach a revolutionary truth. Forgiveness has almost nothing to do with the other person. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself. It is the ultimate act of self-care and self-liberation. The Buddha used a metaphor of startling, visceral power. He said, "Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned." Picture this image in your mind. You are holding a glowing red-hot piece of charcoal in your bare hand. The heat is searing your flesh. The pain is excruciating. Your nerves are screaming. And yet, you hold on. You endure this self-inflicted torture because you are waiting for the perfect moment to hurl this coal at the person who offended you. But that person may have already walked away. They may be miles down the road, completely oblivious to the fact that you are still standing there, burning your own hand. Your suffering does not affect them. Your pain does not punish them. You, and you alone are the one being consumed by the fire. Resentment is this hot coal. It is a fire we keep alive within our own hearts, believing that its smoke will somehow choke our enemy, when in fact, it is only suffocating us. There is another potent saying, resentment is the poison you drink, while hoping the other person dies. We are the ones who feel its toxic effects every single day. To truly embrace the freedom of forgiveness, we must first dismantle the myths that have been built around it. We must be crystal clear about what forgiveness is not. First, forgiveness is not condoning. It is not saying that what happened was okay. You can forgive someone for a terrible act while still firmly believing that the act itself was wrong, harmful, and unacceptable. You are forgiving the person, not the act. Second, forgiveness is not forgetting. It is not a sudden case of amnesia. The memory of the wound may remain, perhaps for a lifetime. Forgiveness is the process of draining that memory of its toxic, emotional charge. It is transforming a throbbing, open wound into a quiet, silver scar, a testament to a past injury, but one that no longer dictates your present reality. And most importantly, forgiveness is not reconciliation. You do not have to let the person back into your life. You are not required to trust them again. You do not have to speak to them, see them, or have anything to do with them ever again. Forgiveness is a profoundly personal and internal act. It is a unilateral declaration of your own independence. It is the moment you decide to cut the invisible, energetic cord that binds you to the person who hurt you, allowing you to finally walk free. As long as you are holding on to anger, you remain emotionally chained to that person. Your thoughts, your energy, your peace of mind are still being controlled by an event from the past. Forgiveness is you taking back the keys to your own heart and mind. Imagine a traveler setting out on a long journey. At the start, their backpack is light, but they make a strange vow for every person who offends or hurts them. They will pick up a rock and place it in their pack for a small slight, a tiny pebble for a harsh word, a stone the size of a fist for a deep betrayal, a heavy, jagged boulder. In the beginning, the extra weight is barely noticeable, but as the years go by, the backpack becomes heavier and heavier. The pebbles and stones and boulders accumulate, their combined weight becoming immense. The traveler's posture becomes stooped, their pace slows to a crawl. They cannot enjoy the beautiful scenery of the journey. The sunrises, the wildflowers, the clear streams, because all of their focus and energy is consumed by the single, agonizing task of hauling the crushing weight of their past grievances. One day, they collapse by the side of the road, exhausted. A wise old woman sits down beside them and asks, "Why do you carry such a heavy burden?" The traveler explains the vow, recounting the story of each rock, reliving the pain of each offense. The old woman listens with compassion, and when the traveler is finished, she does not argue or judge. She simply asks a question. The people who gave you those rocks are not here. Why are you still choosing to carry them in that moment? The traveler understands. The people who hurt them are long gone, living their own lives. They are the only ones still invested in the pain. They are the only ones suffering from the weight. Forgiveness is the act of making a conscious choice. It is the traveler stopping, taking a deep breath, shrugging the heavy backpack off their shoulders, and one by one, taking out each rock and setting it down on the side of the road. It is not done for the sake of the people who gave them the rocks. It is done for the freedom of their own back, for the joy of being able to walk upright and unburdened once more. This is a process you can begin right now. It starts with acknowledging your pain. Don't pretend it didn't hurt. Validate your own experience. Say to yourself, "What happened was painful, and my feelings are justified." Then, make a conscious choice for your own well-being. You can say it out loud or silently for the sake of my own peace. For my own freedom, I choose to release this burden. I choose to set down this hot coal. I choose to empty this rock from my backpack. You release the other person from the emotional debt you feel they owe you. You stop waiting for an apology that may never come. You cancel the debt, not because they deserve it, but because you no longer want to be the debt collector. The final step, if you feel ready, is to silently wish them well. This is not for them, it is for you. Wishing them peace is the ultimate act of cutting the cord, because it replaces the negative energy of resentment with a neutral, or even positive, energy of release. It is declaring, on the deepest level, that they no longer have any power over your emotional state. Forgiveness is the ultimate act of self-love. It is the understanding that your future peace is infinitely more valuable than your past pain. It is the final, necessary step to reclaiming your inner world from the ghosts of yesterday. But we often make this process harder than it needs to be, because we not only suffer from the original wound, but we then inflict further wounds upon ourselves with our own reactions. We add our own rocks to the backpack. This brings us to a crucial teaching on how we multiply our own suffering and how to stop. It is the wisdom of the two arrows. We have journeyed through the intricate landscape of our emotional world, learning to see the suffering in others and to free ourselves from past hurts through the profound act of forgiveness. We have emptied the heavy rocks from our backpack, setting down the burden of old grievances. But the journey of life does not stop. The road ahead will have its own challenges. The winds will blow. The rain will fall. And the ground will sometimes be rough. Inevitably, new moments of pain will arise. The crucial question then becomes, how do we meet this new pain? How do we handle the difficulties of the present moment without creating new rocks to carry into our future? The answer lies in one of the most practical and transformative teachings for daily life, the wisdom, the two arrows. The Buddha taught that to be alive is to be subject to the first arrow. This arrow is the unavoidable, objective pain of human existence. It is the raw, physical or emotional discomfort that is an inescapable part of the contract of being human. A first arrow could be a sudden headache. It could be the diagnosis of an illness. It could be the sting of being criticized by your boss. It could be the deep sadness of losing a loved one, the disappointment of a project failing, or the simple frustration of your car breaking down. These things happen. They are painful. No amount of spiritual practice or positive thinking can build a shield that makes you immune to all of life's first arrows. The wise person does not waste their energy trying to create a world where first arrows don't exist. Instead, they learn how to skillfully deal with the pain when they do. This clean, direct experience of pain is the first arrow. It hurts, but the pain is pure. The problem, and the source of the vast majority of our misery, is that we are rarely content to be struck by only one arrow. The moment the first arrow hits, we almost invariably reach back into our own quiver and shoot ourselves with a second one. and a third, and a fourth. The second arrow is our reaction to the first. It is the story we tell ourselves about the pain. It is the layer of mental and emotional suffering that we add on top of the original. Clean pain. The second arrow is entirely self-inflicted. What does this second arrow look like? It takes many forms. One of the most common is anger. The first arrow of criticism hits, and we immediately fire a second arrow of rage. How dare they say that to me? This is an outrage. Who do they think they are? Another form is self-pity. The first arrow of disappointment strikes, and we shoot a second arrow of victimhood. Why does this always happen to me? I have the worst luck. Life is so unfair. A third form is fear and anxiety. The first arrow of a worrying symptom appears, and we unleash a volley of second arrows of catastrophizing. Oh no, what if this is serious? This could be the end. My whole life is going to fall apart. A fourth is shame and self-blame. The first arrow of making a mistake hits, and we shoot a second arrow straight into our own heart. I'm such an idiot. I always mess everything up. There is something fundamentally wrong with me. In the ancient scriptures, this teaching is explained with a simple, vivid story. Imagine a person is walking through a field. Suddenly, an arrow flies through the air and strikes them in the leg. This is the first arrow. The physical pain is immediate, sharp, and undeniable. It is a fact. Now, an ordinary person, an untrained person, does not stop there. They immediately begin to lament and wail. Oh, I have been shot. This is a catastrophe. The pain is unbearable. Who did this to me? I will find them. What if the arrow was poisoned? What if the wound becomes infected and I lose my leg? My life is over. This entire monologue, the anger, the fear, the self-pity, the catastrophic thinking is the volley of second arrows that they are shooting into the original wound. They are taking a painful situation and making it into an experience of profound suffering. Now, imagine a wise person, a trained practitioner, walking through the same field. An arrow strikes them in the leg. They feel the exact same sharp, immediate, physical pain as the first person. The first arrow is identical, but their response is different. They feel the pain, and they stop there. They observe it with a clear mind. They don't add a story. Their internal monologue is not one of panic, but of calm assessment. There is a sharp, painful sensation in my leg. An arrow has entered the muscle. This requires medical attention. They feel the clean pain of the first arrow, but they wisely refuse to shoot themselves with the second arrow of mental anguish. They are still in pain, but they are not suffering in the same way. They have not multiplied their own misery. This is the practice for us. Life will shoot first arrows. Our work is to become skilled at dodging our own second arrows. The space between the first and second arrow is the same sacred pause we have been exploring. Mindfulness is the tool that allows us to inhabit that space. When a painful event occurs, the practice is to turn our awareness inward, back to the raw data of our experience. Just as we did when we were mapping the landscape of anger. When your boss criticizes you, can you first just notice the hot, tight feeling in your chest, the first arrow, without immediately launching into the story that, my boss is a tyrant who is out to get me, the second arrow? When you feel the sadness of a loss, can you just be with the pure, the physical sensation of grief in your body, the first arrow, without adding the layer of thought that I will never be happy again? The second arrow, the technique is to learn to separate the sensation from the story. We can do this by simply and gently naming our experience, instead of launching into a long, dramatic narrative. We can silently and calmly state to ourselves, this is pain, this is a feeling of sadness, this is anxiety. This simple act of labeling creates a space. It keeps the experience at the level of a manageable, observable sensation, preventing it from metastasizing into a catastrophic story. Notice the profound difference between the thought, there is a feeling of anxiety present, and the thought, I'm falling apart. The first is a calm observation of a first arrow. The second is a devastating second arrow. The goal of this practice is not to become a feelingless robot. It is not to suppress the first arrow. In fact, the wise person learns to feel the clean pain of the first arrow fully, with courage and openness, because resisting it or pretending it isn't there just creates more tension and a different kind of suffering. The goal is to feel what is real, to accept the unavoidable pains of life with grace, but to become a vigilant guardian of our own minds, refusing to allow the second, third, and fourth arrows of our own making to fly. This is how we stop being the primary cause of our own suffering. This is how we learn to bear the clean pain of being human with a quiet dignity and an unshakable peace. But understanding this principle in a calm moment is one thing. How do we actually apply it when the pressure is on, when the ground is shaking, and our ingrained habits are screaming for us to react? To do that, we need a toolkit of practical, in-the-moment technique. We have arrived at the very heart of the practice. We have explored the theory. We understand the wisdom of not accepting the unwanted gift, of mapping our inner terrain, of anchoring with the breath, and of dodging the self-inflicted second arrow. We have a beautiful, intricate map of the inner world. But a map is of little use when your car has just skidded off the road in a blizzard. In those moments of genuine crisis, when the ground is shaking beneath you, when you receive shocking news, when you are blindsided by a confrontation, you do not need a map. You need a first aid kit. You need a set of simple, powerful, and immediate tools that you can apply right now to stop the bleeding. This is where the grand theories of mindfulness distill into their most practical and potent forms. These are not long, formal meditations that require a quiet room and a cushion. These are the emergency brakes of the mind, the spiritual CPR you can perform on yourself in the middle of a chaotic office, a tense family dinner, or a crowded subway car. These are the techniques that allow you to find your feet when the world feels like it's tilting on its axis. The first and perhaps most essential tool is a simple acronym STOP. It is an emergency protocol for the soul, a 4-step sequence to interrupt the lightning-fast chain reaction of anger and panic. S stands for stop. This is the most difficult and most crucial step. Whatever you are doing, just stop. If you are about to speak, close your mouth. If you are typing an email, take your hands off the keyboard. If you are pacing around the room, stand still. This physical act of stopping sends a powerful interrupt signal to your brain. You are refusing to continue down the habitual, reactive path. You are breaking the circuit. It is a moment of radical defiance against the tyranny of your own conditioning. You don't need a reason to stop. The fact that you feel overwhelmed is reason enough. You are simply giving yourself the gift of a single moment of non-action. T stands for take a breath. Once you have physically stopped, you bring your full attention to one single breath. Not 10 breaths, not 5 minutes of meditation. Just one. This connects back to our anchor. Feel the air come into your body. Feel your lungs expand. And feel the long, slow release as you exhale. This single, conscious breath is the wedge that you drive into the tiny crack between stimulus and response, forcing it open. It is the action that begins to calm the hijacked nervous system, reminding your body that despite the perceived crisis, you are, in this moment, physically safe. O stands for observe. In the space created by the stop and the breath, you turn your awareness inward with a gentle, non-judgmental curiosity. What is actually happening right now? You can do a quick scan of your body, just as we practiced. Is your jaw tight? Are your shoulders tense? Is your heart racing? Just notice the raw physical sensations without needing to name them as anger or fear. Then, you can notice your thoughts. What is the story my mind is telling me? You can see the catastrophic thoughts swirling, the stories of blame and victimhood. The key here is to see them as mental events like clouds passing in the sky, not as objective truth. You are observing the first arrow, the raw data of the experience, without immediately shooting the second. P stands for proceed. This is the final, vital step. The purpose of S, T, O, P is not to get stuck in a state of frozen analysis. It is to enable you to move forward, but from a place of choice rather than compulsion. Having stopped, breathed, and observed, you can now ask yourself, what is the wisest, most helpful thing to do next? The answer might be to speak, but with words chosen carefully. It might be to remain silent. It might be to walk away and address the situation later. It might be to ask a question to get more clarity. By proceeding from this place of awareness, you have transformed a knee-jerk reaction into a wise and considered response. The second practical tool is grounding, or quitte literally, finding your feet. When the mind is a whirlwind of chaotic thoughts and overwhelming emotions, it can feel like you've been swept up into a tornado. The mind is in the past, ruminating on what happened, or in the future, catastrophizing about what might happen. The body, however, is always, unfailingly, in the present moment. Grounding is the practice of intentionally yanking your awareness out of the chaotic story in your head and planting it firmly into the physical reality of the here and now. The simplest way to do this is to bring your full attention to the points of contact your body is making with the world. Feel the soles of your feet flat on the floor. Really feel it. Notice the texture of the carpet or the coolness of the tile. Notice the subtle pressure, the sensation of gravity holding you to the earth. If you are sitting, feel the weight of your body on the chair. Feel the texture of the fabric on your legs and back. Place your hands on your knees and notice the warmth of your skin, the fabric of your pants. This act of focusing on simple, neutral, physical sensations is an incredibly powerful anchor. It pulls your focus away from the abstract, terrifying stories in your mind and places it onto concrete, verifiable reality. The ground beneath you is solid. The chair is holding you. You are here. Now, this simple practice can instantly reduce the intensity of panic and create a sense of stability when everything else feels like it's falling apart. The third tool is a subtle but powerful one, labeling or noting. When we are caught in a strong emotion, we tend to fuse with it. We don't just feel anger, we are anger, Labeling is the practice of creating a tiny bit of space by mentally putting a name to the experience. As you notice a feeling arise, you silently, gently, say its name to yourself. If you feel the heat in your face, you might just note, heat, heat. If you feel your stomach clenching, tightness, tightness. If you recognize the overall emotional tone, you can label it anger, anger, or anxiety. Anxiety. This sounds almost too simple, but the effect is profound. The moment you name an emotion, you are no longer it. You are the one who is noticing it. You have shifted from being the actor completely lost in the role to being the audience member, watching the actor on the stage. This act of naming diffuses the emotion's power. It takes it from being an all-encompassing subjective reality and turns it into a manageable, objective event in your consciousness. It helps you see that these feelings are impersonal, transient events, not the core of who you are. The noting should be soft and gentle, like whispering a name, not harsh and judgmental. It is an acknowledgement, not a condemnation. These three tools, S, T, O, P, grounding and labeling, are your emergency first aid kit. They are not meant to solve the underlying problem in that instant. They are meant to get you through the crisis moment without shooting yourself with a volley of second arrows. They are the skills that allow you to find your feet when the ground shakes, so that you can then walk forward with wisdom and grace. But once we have managed our internal state, once we have found our balance, we are still faced with the challenge of interacting with the world. The next step on our journey is to explore how this inner calm translates into our outer actions, beginning with the very first and most powerful way we impact our world, our words. We have built an internal first aid kit, a set of powerful, in-the-moment tools to help us find our footing when the ground shakes. The S, T, O, P method, the practice of grounding, and the technique of labeling allow us to manage the inner storm, to dodge the second arrow, and to create a vital space of calm awareness. We have learned to become the masters of our inner world, but we do not live in isolation. The journey of wisdom inevitably leads us back into relationship with others, and our primary tool of engagement with the world is our speech. Once we have found our own center, how do we then communicate from that place of stability and wisdom, especially when the echoes of anger or frustration are still resonating within us? This is the domain of right speech, a cornerstone of the Buddhist path, and a profound practice for transforming conflict into connection. When we hear the term right speech, our minds often jump to the most obvious interpretation, don't lie. And while that is certainly the foundation, the concept is far richer and more nuanced. It is a comprehensive guide to skillful communication, designed to prevent harm and cultivate understanding. Right speech, or samavaka in the ancient Pali language, is traditionally understood to have four components. It is the practice of abstaining from falsehood, from divisive speech, from harsh speech, and from idle chatter. To practice right speech is to recognize that our words are not mere sounds, they are powerful forces. They are seeds that we plant in the world and in the minds of others. Seeds that will inevitably grow into fruits of either harmony or suffering. The first component, abstaining from falsehood, is the bedrock of trust. Without it, meaningful communication is impossible. But it goes deeper than simply avoiding outright lies. It means speaking with integrity, representing situations as accurately as we can, and avoiding the subtle exaggerations or convenient omissions that serve our ego but distort the truth. It is a commitment to being a reliable source of reality for those around us. The second component is abstaining from divisive speech. This is the practice of refusing to use words as a wedge to drive people apart. The most common form of this is gossip, speaking about someone who is not present in a way that would damage their reputation or turn others against them. When we engage in gossip, we are trafficking in negativity, creating an atmosphere of suspicion and discord for a moment of fleeting, egoic validation. Right speech asks us to become a force for unity, to speak in ways that build bridges, not walls. The third component, abstaining from harsh speech, is where the practice meets our anger head-on. Harsh speech is verbal violence. It is the use of words as weapons. It includes yelling, insulting, name-calling, belittling, and the use of cruel sarcasm intended to wound. When we are in the grip of anger, the temptation to use harsh speech is immense. It feels like a righteous release of pressure, but every time we do, we are throwing that hot coal. We burn the other person, certainly, but we also sear our own heart, degrading our own integrity and sowing seeds of future resentment and retaliation. The fourth component is abstaining from idle chatter. This may seem less serious, but it is a subtle drain on our energy and awareness. Idle chatter is speech that is aimless and unproductive. It is the endless commentary on trivial matters, the filling of silence with noise simply because we are uncomfortable with stillness. It clutters our own minds and the minds of others, preventing the space needed for more meaningful and purposeful communication to arise. Understanding these four principles is helpful, but we need a practical tool to apply them in the heat of the moment. For this, the wisdom traditions offer a beautiful framework known as the 4 gates of speech. Before a word passes your lips, especially a word spoken in a charged or difficult situation, you are encouraged to pass it through these 4 gates, asking yourself 4 questions. The first gate is it true? This is the gate of honesty. It immediately filters out lies, rumors, and unsubstantiated claims. It forces us to pause and check our facts before we react based on an assumption or a misunderstanding. If the statement is not true, the gate remains closed. If it is true, the word proceeds to the second gate. Is it kind? This is the gate of compassion. A statement can be 100% accurate but delivered with such cruelty that it shatters a person. This gate asks us to consider the impact of our words. Is there a gentler way to say this? Can I frame this feedback constructively rather than destructively? Is my intention to help or to hurt? If the statement is true but unkind, a wise person seeks a way to rephrase it or waits for a better time. If the word is both true and kind, it arrives at the third gate. Is it necessary? This is the gate of wisdom, and it is perhaps the most powerful filter of all. We can have a thought that is both true and kind, but that simply does not need to be said. So much of our speech is driven by the ego's need to contribute, to be heard, to be right. This gate asks us to consider, will saying this genuinely benefit the situation? Does it serve a higher purpose? Or am I just adding to the noise? You may be amazed at how many conflicts can be avoided simply by closing this gate. Finally, if the word is true, kind, and necessary, it comes to the fourth and final gate. Is it the right time? This is the gate of skillful means, a perfectly crafted message of truth. Kindness and necessity will fall on deaf ears if delivered at the wrong moment. Is the other person emotionally receptive right now? Are they calm and open? Or are they stressed, defensive, and overwhelmed? To speak a necessary truth to someone who is not ready to hear, it is often a wasted effort that can actually make things worse. This gate teaches us the profound virtue of patience. There is an old story that powerfully illustrates the irreversible nature of our words. A man in a village spread a malicious rumor about a local merchant. As the rumor spread, the merchant's business was ruined and his family was shunned, consumed by guilt. The man went to the town's wise sage and confessed his sin. "I will do anything to make it right," he pleaded. The sage looked at him and said, "There is something you can do. Take a feather pillow. Go to the highest hill overlooking the town on a very windy day. Cut it open and shake out every last feather." The man was relieved. The task seemed strange, but simple enough. He did as he was told, returning to the sage with an empty pillowcase. "Now for the second part of your penance," the sage said. "Go back and gather up every single feather." The man's face fell. "But that's impossible," he cried. "The wind has scattered them for miles. I could never find them all." The sage nodded slowly. "So it is with your words. Once they leave your lips, they are scattered on the winds of the world. You can never fully take them back. Your apology may gather a few, but many will remain lost forever, causing harm in places you will never even know." This story reminds us that right speech is not just a moral practice, it is a pragmatic one. Our words create our reality, but the practice of skillful communication is not just about what we say, it is also about how we listen. True right speech includes deep listening. Most of the time, we do not listen to understand, we listen to reply. We are waiting for the other person to take a breath so we can jump in with our own point, our own defense, our own story. Deep listening, as taught by the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh, is the practice of listening with only one purpose: to help the other person suffer less. It is to offer them the gift of your full, non-judgmental presence. It is to listen not just to their words, but to the feelings and the suffering that lie beneath them. When someone truly feels heard, a miracle often occurs. Their anger and defensiveness begin to melt away, because they no longer need to fight to be understood. Often, the greatest gift we can give someone in a state of anger is the gift of our silent, compassionate listening. By practicing right speech, by filtering our words through the four gates, and by offering the gift of deep listening, we transform our mouth from a potential weapon into an instrument of healing. We learn that true strength is not in the power to wound with our words, but in the wisdom to heal with them, or to heal with our silence. But what of those times when our anger feels righteous, when we see injustice and feel a fire rise up within us? Not from a place of personal grievance, but from a place of principle. How do we channel that powerful energy? We must now learn to distinguish between two very different kinds of fire: the destructive fire of hate and the clarifying fire of compassion. Throughout this journey, we have been developing a toolkit for managing the fire of personal anger. We have learned to not take the bait, to map the feelings in our bodies, to anchor with the breath, and to use our words with wisdom. These practices are designed to dissolve the ego's selfish, reactive rages. But a question naturally arises, a question that any compassionate and engaged person must ask. What about the anger that feels righteous? What about the anger we feel when we witness injustice, cruelty, or oppression? Is it not right to feel anger when the innocent are harmed? Is the path of wisdom one of passive acceptance in the face of evil? This is a critical point, and to misunderstand it is to risk turning the path of peace into a path of apathy. The wisdom traditions do not ask us to be indifferent to suffering. On the contrary, they ask us to be so profoundly sensitive to it that we are moved to act. The key is to understand that there are two fundamentally different kinds of fire. There is the destructive, uncontrolled wildfire of hatred, and there is the focused, purifying fire of compassion. Learning to distinguish between these two fires within ourselves is the mark of a true spiritual warrior. The fire of hate is the default response of the ego when confronted with something it deems wrong. This fire is hot, chaotic, and blinding. It is fueled by a sense of us versus them. It creates a villain, a monster, and its primary desire is not just to stop the harm, but to punish the perpetrator. It wants to see the enemy suffer. This fire is intoxicating and feels powerful, but it is ultimately a poison. It consumes the person who wields it, leading to bitterness, burnout, and a heart hardened by resentment. It clouds judgment, making strategic action difficult. And most tragically, the fire of hate often perpetuates the very cycles of violence and retribution it claims to oppose. It is the fire that says, "I hate you, and I want to destroy you." The fire of compassion is an entirely different energy. It is a clean, clear, and intensely focused fire. Think of a welder's torch. Not a wildfire. It is not born from a sense of personal grievance or a wounded ego. It is born from a deep, empathetic connection to the suffering of all beings. When this energy sees injustice, it is not personally offended. It is moved by the reality that beings are being harmed. Its goal is not to punish the perpetrator, but to skillfully and powerfully stop the harm. Its goal is to protect the vulnerable, to heal the wound, and to transform the conditions that allowed the injustice to arise in the first place. This fire is fierce, assertive, and unyielding, but it is not hateful. It is the powerful energy of wisdom in action. It is the fire that says, "Your actions are causing great suffering, and because I care for both the victim and for you, the perpetrator caught in your own delusion, this must stop." History gives us powerful examples of this distinction. Think of the great leaders who have faced down immense hatred and violence. Martin Luther King Jr. stood against the brutal injustice of racial segregation. The energy that fueled his movement was undeniably a fire, but it was not the fire of hate. His speeches, though powerful and demanding, were rooted in the Christian concept of agape, or unconditional love, and the Gandhian principle of non-violent resistance. He consistently appealed to the conscience of his opponents, seeking to awaken their humanity, not to destroy them. He fought for a beloved community, a vision that included his oppressors, transformed and healed. This was the fire of compassion, and its power changed a nation. Similarly, consider the Dalai Lama, who has faced the loss of his country and the profound suffering of his people. Yet, he has never advocated for a response based on hatred. He maintains an unwavering stance against the injustice, while simultaneously calling for compassion for those who are perpetrating it. recognizing that they too are trapped in a web of political and historical conditioning. This is not weakness. It is a display of almost incomprehensible spiritual strength. It is the understanding that answering hatred with more hatred only feeds the flames. In the rich iconography of Tibetan Buddhism, this concept is embodied in the figures of the wrathful deities. At first glance, these are terrifying figures. They are depicted with bulging eyes, bared fangs, and muscular bodies, often surrounded by a halo of wisdom flames. They trample on figures representing greed, hatred, and ignorance. A superficial look would see them as demons, as figures of anger, but their true meaning is the exact opposite. They are not demons, they are enlightened beings, often manifestations of the Buddhas of compassion. Their wrath is not directed at people, it is the fierce, powerful, and uncompromising energy of compassion itself, rising up to destroy the obstacles to happiness and enlightenment. The fire is the flame of wisdom that burns away confusion. The fangs are not for devouring flesh, but for cutting through the tangled knots of the ego. It is the fierce, protective energy of a loving mother who would stop at nothing to protect her child from harm. It is a love so powerful it will not tolerate delusion or cruelty. This is the energy we can learn to cultivate within ourselves when we are confronted with injustice. It is a righteous power that is not rooted in our own small ego, but in a vast and impersonal love for all that lives. The practice is to look inward when we feel this fire. We must ask ourselves, what is the source of this energy? Is it my personal ego feeling slighted, or is my heart breaking at the sight of suffering? We can then consciously shift our focus. Instead of dwelling on the character of the perpetrator, we can focus on the reality of the harm being caused. We can direct our energy not toward punishment, but toward skillful action. What can be done to protect the vulnerable? What can be done to change the system? What can be said or done that will awaken wisdom rather than inflame hatred? When we act from this fire of compassion, our actions have more clarity, more endurance, and more power to create real change. We are no longer simply reacting to the world's darkness. We are actively embodying its light. We become fierce advocates for justice, but we do so with a heart that remains open and unbroken. This is the profound path of the spiritual activist, the bodhisattva warrior. And now, having examined the great, explosive fires of anger, both personal and principled, we must turn our attention back to our daily lives. For often, the peace of our minds is not disturbed by great explosions, but by the slow, quiet burn of the subtle embers of aversion, the constant, low-grade irritation, annoyance, and resentment that can quietly poison our days. We have stood in the presence of two great fires, the blinding, destructive fire of personal hatred, and the brilliant, purifying fire of compassionate action. We have learned to distinguish them, to starve the first, and to cultivate the second, allowing us to stand for what is right in the world without losing our own peace. This is a profound skill, but for many of us, our daily tranquility is not scorched by a single, massive forest fire. Instead, it is slowly eroded by the constant, almost invisible heat rising from a bed of silent, smoldering embers. We must now turn our attention away from the great conflagrations and learn to notice the subtle, insidious forms of aversion that quietly poison our days. When we think of anger, we imagine an explosion, a slammed door, a raised voice, a torrent of furious words. But this is only anger in its most dramatic and obvious form. The family of aversion is large and varied, and most of its members are far more subtle and discreet. They are the background noise of our minds, the low-grade static of negativity that we become so accustomed to, we often don't even notice it's there. This is the realm of irritation, annoyance, impatience, judgment, and resentment. Think of the small, sharp sting of irritation when the driver in front of you misses the green light because they are looking at their phone, or the grating feeling of annoyance at the sound of a colleague clicking their pen incessantly during a quiet moment. Consider the quiet hum of impatience you feel when waiting in a long line, the internal monologue complaining about the inefficiency of it all. Notice the constant, subtle stream of judgment that flows through the mind as we observe the world, a silent critique of someone's clothes, their opinions, their lifestyle. These are all junior members of the anger family. They are small sparks from the same fire of aversion, the same fundamental feeling that I don't like this, and things should be different from how they are. Because these feelings are not explosive, we tend to dismiss them as insignificant. We ignore the irritation. We swallow the annoyance. We allow the judgments to pass without notice. We believe we are handling them, but we are not, unacknowledged and unprocessed. These small moments of aversion do not simply disappear. They accumulate. They are like tiny drops of dirty water falling, one by one, into a large glass jar within us. Imagine you start your day with a clear, empty jar. You wake up late, a few drops go in. You spill coffee on your shirt, a few more drops. You get stuck in an unexpected traffic jam, and your mind fills with irritation. A steady trickle fills the jar. You get to work, and a colleague makes a slightly passive-aggressive comment, another splash. The office Wi-Fi is slow, interrupting your workflow, more drops of frustration. A meeting is disorganized and feels like a waste of time. The water level rises further. None of these are major life crises. They are the simple, everyday frictions of being human. But with each one, the jar gets fuller and fuller. By the time you get home in the evening, your internal jar is filled almost to the brim with the accumulated, unprocessed negativity of the day. You are walking around in a state of high-level, latent stress, though you may not even be consciously aware of it. Then, the final straw. Your child leaves their toys on the floor. Your partner asks what you want for dinner. The dog barks. It is a single, tiny, insignificant event. One more drop. But because the jar is already full, that one last drop causes the water to surge over the rim, unleashing a flood. You snap, you explode with a level of anger that is wildly disproportionate to the situation. Your family looks at you, bewildered, wondering why you are so furious about a misplaced toy, and you yourself might feel ashamed and confused later, wondering, why did I get so angry about something so small? The truth is, you didn't get angry about the toy. You got angry because your container for unexpressed aversion was full. The toy was not the cause. It was merely the trigger. The cause was the dozens of small irritations and frustrations you had been collecting and storing all day long. The silent embers, left untended, had finally burst into flame. The practice, then, is not to pretend we don't feel these small annoyances. The practice is to learn how to empty the jar, drop by drop. As the day goes on, this requires a form of micro-mindfulness, You don't need to sit on a cushion for 20 minutes every time someone cuts you in line. You simply need to bring a moment of conscious, non-judgmental awareness to the feeling as it arises. When you notice that slow driver and feel the heat of irritation, you can just silently acknowledge it. There is irritation. That's it. You don't need to analyze it or justify it. You just notice it. You take one conscious breath, our ever-present anchor. You might notice the tension in your shoulders, the slight clenching in your gut. You are simply observing the arising and passing of a small weather pattern. In that moment of mindful acknowledgement, you have processed the drop. You have allowed it to flow through you, rather than being stored in the jar. When you hear the annoying sound of the clicking pen, you can notice the aversion. Take a breath, and perhaps gently bring your attention to another sound, the hum of the air conditioner, the distant traffic, or to the feeling of your feet on the floor. You are unhooking your mind from the irritation. This practice of tending to the small embers is profoundly important for two reasons. First, it dramatically lowers your baseline level of stress and negativity. You stop walking through the world with a jar full of dirty water, ready to spill at the slightest provocation. Your mind becomes a calmer, clearer, and more pleasant place to inhabit. You begin to experience a quiet, underlying sense of well-being that is not dependent on the world being perfect. Second, practicing with the small stuff is the most effective way to train for the big stuff. If you wait until you are in a state of blinding rage to try and practice mindfulness, it is incredibly difficult. It's like trying to learn how to swim during a tsunami. But if you practice noticing and letting go of 100 tiny annoyances throughout the day, you are building your mindfulness muscle. You are strengthening the neural pathways of awareness and non-reactivity. Then, when a truly significant first arrow strikes a major disappointment, a real injustice, you are ready. Your skills are honed. Your mind is already conditioned to pause, to observe, and to choose a wise response. The athlete does not just train by playing in the championship game. They train with daily, repetitive, seemingly minor drills. Our practice is the same. Tending to the silent embers is our daily drill. True mastery over anger is not found in the rare moments of heroic restraint during a major crisis. It is forged in the countless, mundane moments of everyday life. It is the gentle, consistent choice to meet the small sting of irritation with a breath of awareness, to greet the stab of annoyance with a moment of observation, and to let the silent stream of judgment flow by without getting swept away. But to truly master this, we must look even deeper. We must ask why these things, both large and small, have so much power over us in the first place. The power comes not from the events themselves, but from the stories we tell ourselves about them, and it is to these stories that we now must turn. We have journeyed deep into the inner world, exploring the grand fires of rage and the silent, smoldering embers of daily irritation. We have come to see that whether the fire is large or small, we are the ones who supply much of its fuel. We feed it with our reactions, our judgments, and our resistance. Now, we arrive at the very source of that fuel. We arrive at the storyteller, the scriptwriter, the inner narrator who takes the raw data of reality and weaves it into a compelling drama of anger, victimhood, and justification. To achieve true freedom, we must learn to see this storyteller at work, and with gentle wisdom, learn to rewrite its scripts. The fundamental principle is this: an event happens in the world. And then we tell ourselves a story about what that event means. We almost never react to the event itself. We react to our story. The event is neutral. The story is what gives it its emotional charge. Imagine a video camera silently recording your life. The camera captures only objective facts. A car changes lanes. A person's facial muscles form a frown. An email arrives with specific words in a specific order. This is reality. But we are not video cameras. We are story-making machines. The car doesn't just change lanes. Our story is, that selfish jerk cut me off deliberately. The person doesn't just frown. Our story is, she is angry with me. I must have done something wrong. The email doesn't just contain words. Our story is, this is a passive-aggressive attack on my competence. The anger, the hurt, the anxiety, it all lives in the story, not in the objective fact. The practice, then, is to become aware of the gap between the event and the story, and to consciously investigate the tales we tell ourselves. Modern psychology has given us a useful vocabulary for these flawed narratives. They are called cognitive distortions, which is simply a technical term for faulty or unhelpful ways of thinking. These are the bugs in our mental software that predictably generate negative emotions. By learning to spot them, we can begin to debug our own minds. One of the most common distortions that fuels anger is mind reading. This is the confident assumption that we know the intentions and thoughts of others, usually assuming the worst. When a friend doesn't reply to our text message, the mind reading story is, they are ignoring me. They don't value our friendship. We don't consider the 100 other possibilities. They are busy. Their phone is off. They saw it and forgot to reply. We jump to the most personal and painful conclusion and then get angry at the story we just invented. Another is overgeneralizing. This is when we take a single negative event and turn it into a never-ending pattern of defeat. We make a mistake at work, and the story isn't just I made a mistake. The story becomes, I always mess things up. I can never do anything right. This kind of thinking paints us into a corner of hopelessness and self-criticism, which often curdles into anger at ourselves or the world. A close cousin to this is all or nothing thinking, sometimes called black and white thinking. This distortion sees the world in absolute extremes. If a project you worked on is not a complete, unqualified success, then it is a total failure. If someone disagrees with one of your opinions, they are completely against you. This rigidity leaves no room for nuance, complexity, or grace. It creates a brittle ego that is constantly being shattered by a world that is, in reality, mostly shades of grey. Then there is labeling. This is the act of taking one specific behavior and applying a global, negative label to the person or to ourselves. The person who made a mistake is not a person who did something wrong. They are an idiot. The person who acted selfishly is not a person who did a selfish thing. They are a jerk. This mental shortcut is a form of verbal violence. It dehumanizes the other person, making it much easier for us to justify our anger and dismiss them entirely. Finally, there is personalization. This is the tendency to relate everything back to ourselves, to see ourselves as the cause of external events that we have no control over. It's the feeling that a friend's bad mood must be our fault, or that when things go wrong, it is somehow a reflection on us. It is the ego placing itself at the center of the universe. A very stressful and anger-provoking place to be. These cognitive distortions are the building blocks of the scripts that fuel our anger. The practice is to become a mindful detective, to catch these thoughts in the act and gently question them. The goal isn't to berate ourselves for having them, they are deeply ingrained human habits, but to hold them up to the light of inquiry. When you feel a surge of anger, you can pause and ask yourself, what is the story I am telling myself right now? Once you identify the story, you can question it like a gentle but thorough journalist. You can ask, what is the actual, objective evidence for this thought? Is there any evidence that might contradict it? Am I engaging in mind reading or labeling? Is there a more generous, more compassionate, or simply less personal way to interpret this situation? Let's see this in action with a simple, everyday parable. You are walking down the street, and you see your friend, Sarah, on the other side. You smile and give a big wave. Sarah looks in your general direction. Her face is blank, and then she turns and walks into a store. The objective event, the video camera footage, is just that you waved, and she did not wave back. Now, watch the first story arise. The reactive, unexamined script. Sarah ignored me. She looked right at me and deliberately snubbed me. What is wrong with her? After I helped her with that project last month, this is the thanks I get. She's so ungrateful. I'm not going to bother calling her for her birthday next week. This script is a masterclass in cognitive distortions. It includes mind reading. She deliberately snubbed me. Personalization. This is the thanks I get. And labeling, she's so ungrateful. The result of this story is a potent cocktail of hurt, anger, and resentment. You are now carrying a new rock in your backpack. But what if you have been practicing? You feel the initial sting of not being acknowledged, the first arrow, but before you shoot the second arrow of your story, you pause. You notice the script beginning to play in your head, and you decide to question it. You ask, do I know for a fact that she saw me? Is it possible she didn't have her contact lenses in? Is there another way to see this? And suddenly, new stories become possible. The alternative script might sound like this. Maybe Sarah was completely lost in thought. She's been really stressed about her sick mother lately. Maybe she was just replaying a conversation with the doctor in her head. Or maybe the sun was in her eyes and she couldn't see who was waving. Or maybe she was just in a daze. Notice the effect of these new stories. They are not necessarily more true than the first one. You don't know what was happening in Sarah's mind, but they are possible. And their effect on your emotional state is revolutionary. The anger vanishes. The hurt dissolves. The resentment has no ground to stand on. You are left with either a simple neutrality or even a flicker of concern for your friend. The external event has not changed one bit. But by consciously choosing to rewrite your internal script, you have completely transformed your emotional reality. You have taken back your power. We are the authors of our own inner lives. We are constantly telling ourselves stories about the world, about others, and about ourselves. When those stories are dominated by the unexamined habits of cognitive distortion, our lives will be filled with anger, anxiety, and suffering. But when we learn to become conscious, compassionate, and creative editors of our own minds, we unlock the door to a profound and unshakable peace. Rewriting a negative script is a powerful act of self-liberation. But what if we could go one step further? What if, instead of just neutralizing the negative, we could proactively cultivate its opposite? What if we could learn to write scripts of kindness, connection, and goodwill? This is the beautiful practice of cultivating loving kindness, the ultimate antidote to the stories of anger. We have learned to become the skillful editors of our own minds, to identify the distorted stories that fuel our anger, and to gently question them until their power dissolves. This is a crucial skill of mental self-defense, a way of clearing the weeds of negativity that choke our inner landscape. But a wise gardener knows that pulling weeds is only half the work. To create a truly beautiful garden, one must also proactively plant flowers. We must learn not only to deconstruct the scripts of anger, but to actively write and rehearse a new script of kindness, connection, and goodwill. This is the practice of cultivating metta, or loving kindness, the most profound and direct antidote to the poison of anger. The logic behind this practice is as simple as it is powerful. You cannot hold two opposing emotions in your heart at the exact same time. It is impossible to feel the expansive warmth of genuine, unconditional kindness for a person, while simultaneously feeling the constricting heat of anger and hatred toward them. The two states are mutually exclusive. They are like light and darkness. You don't get rid of darkness by trying to shovel it out of a room. You simply turn on a light, and the darkness vanishes as a natural consequence. Loving kindness is that light. It is a practice not of fighting anger, but of replacing it with a far more powerful and nourishing emotion. Metta meditation is a systematic method for cultivating this quality. It is often misunderstood as a form of prayer or wishful thinking, but it is better understood as a form of heartfelt conditioning, a workout for the heart. It is a practice that, over time, can change the default settings of our mind from judgment and irritation to warmth and compassion. Let us walk through this gentle and transformative practice together. It begins in a place that may seem counterintuitive to some, with ourselves. Find a comfortable posture, close your eyes, and allow your breath to be natural. The first step is to offer the light of loving kindness to your own being. This is not an act of narcissism, it is an act of fundamental sanity. You cannot pour water from an empty cup. If your own heart is a desert of self-criticism and judgment, you have no living water to offer anyone else. So, we begin by silently repeating a few simple, powerful phrases directed inward. The traditional phrases are, "May I be safe," "May I be happy," "May I be healthy," "May I live with ease." As you repeat these phrases, try not to just say the words mechanically. Try to connect with the sincere intention behind them. Feel the wish for your own genuine well-being. For many of us, this is the most difficult step, but it is the most essential. We are planting the seed of kindness in the soil of our own heart. Once you have spent some time offering this kindness to yourself, the next step is to bring to mind a benefactor or a dear friend. Picture someone who is easy to love, someone whose presence naturally brings a smile to your face. It could be a mentor, a cherished family member, a close friend, or even a beloved pet. Hold their image in your mind's eye. See them happy and radiant, and then extend the same phrases of goodwill to them. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. Feel the natural warmth that flows from your heart as you offer these wishes. This stage is like warming up the muscle of compassion, making it pliable and strong. Next, we widen the circle. Bring to mind a neutral person. This is someone you see regularly but for whom you have no strong positive or negative feelings. It could be the cashier at your grocery store, the mail carrier, a person you see on your daily commute. You know their face, but you do not know their story. By extending the same wishes to them, may you be safe, happy, healthy, and live with ease. We begin to stretch our capacity for kindness beyond the easy circle of our personal attachments. We are acknowledging our shared humanity with a near stranger, recognizing that they, just like us, wish to be happy and free from suffering. Now we come to the most challenging and perhaps most transformative stage of the practice. We are asked to bring to mind a difficult person. It is wise to start small, not with the person who has caused you the deepest wound, but perhaps with someone who consistently irritates or annoys you. Hold their image in your mind. The practice here is not to forget what they have done or to condone their behavior. The practice is to see them, for a moment, not as your adversary, but simply as another suffering human being, trapped in their own patterns of confusion and pain. Then, as an experiment in your own heart's laboratory, you try to extend the phrases of metta to them. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. This can feel difficult, even impossible at first. It may feel forced, but the act itself is a radical rebellion against the ego's desire to hold on to grievance. Every time you offer even a flicker of goodwill to someone who has angered you, you are dissolving a link in the chain of your own resentment. You are doing it not for them, you are doing it for your own freedom. You are setting down the hot coal. Finally, having moved through these stages, you let the feeling of loving kindness expand. You radiate it outward from your heart in all directions, front, back, left, right, up, and down. You extend it to all beings everywhere, without exception, friends, enemies, strangers, animals, all beings in all realms. May all beings be safe. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings live with ease. This final stage cultivates a sense of boundless compassion, dissolving the artificial barriers between me and them and connecting us to the vast web of life. A beautiful story illustrates the practical power of this practice. A young monk was trying to meditate in his forest hut, but he was becoming increasingly agitated. Nearby, a group of carpenters were building a house, and the constant, jarring sound of their hammering was driving him to distraction. His mind was filled with anger and aversion. Finally, he went to his teacher and complained, "Master, I cannot find any peace. The noise from those carpenters is making it impossible to meditate." The teacher listened patiently and then said, "Go back to your cushion. But this time, every time you hear the sound of a hammer striking a nail, instead of feeling anger, I want you to send a thought of loving kindness to the men. Silently wish to them, may your work be strong and true. May you be safe in your labor. May this house you are building be a place of happiness for the family who will live here." The monk was skeptical, but he returned to his hut and followed his teacher's instructions. At first, it was a struggle. His mind wanted to revert to irritation, but with each hammer blow, he persisted in offering a thought of goodwill. Slowly, something inside him began to shift. His heart softened. His resistance to the sound dissolved. The noise itself had not changed. The hammers were just as loud, the rhythm just as jarring, but because the monk's inner state had been transformed from aversion to kindness, the sound was no longer a disturbance. In fact, it had become a support for his practice. a bell of mindfulness reminding him, again and again, to open his heart. The problem was never the noise. It was only his resistance to it. Regularly practicing metta creates what can be described as an emotional buffer zone. A heart that has been consistently softened and strengthened by this practice is less reactive. It is less sticky to the negativity of the world. Insults and annoyances don't land with the same painful impact because they are landing on a soft, compassionate cushion rather than a hard, brittle surface of ego. We stop filling our inner jar with daily resentments because our default response begins to shift from judgment to understanding. Loving kindness is the gentle rain that, over time, can extinguish even the most stubborn embers of ill will. It is the practice of actively, intentionally, and beautifully rewriting the script of our lives. And the most intense and rewarding place to stage this new play, the ultimate training ground for the compassionate heart, is within the sacred and often challenging space of our closest relationships. We have learned to cultivate a heart of loving kindness, to proactively plant a garden of goodwill within our own minds, a gentle rain to cool the fires of anger. This internal practice is the foundation, but a garden is not grown for its own sake. Its beauty and nourishment are meant to be shared. The true test of our practice, the place where our inner work meets the friction of the world, is in the sacred and often challenging domain of our relationships. It is here, in the intimate laboratory of our connections with partners, family, and close friends, that we are given our most profound opportunities for growth. We must learn to see our relationships not as a potential source of our frustration, but as our most sacred and effective practice ground, our personal dojo. Why is it that the people we love the most often have an uncanny ability to provoke the strongest reactions in us? A cutting remark from a stranger might be easily brushed off, but the same remark from a spouse or a sibling can send us into a tailspin of anger and hurt. The reasons are deep and complex. These are the people who know our history. They were often present when our deepest wounds and insecurities, our buttons, were first installed. They know, consciously or unconsciously, exactly where to press to get a reaction. Furthermore, the stakes are higher. We are deeply invested in their opinion of us. Their love and approval are tied to our own sense of well-being. So a conflict with them can feel like a threat to our very foundation. Our identity is inextricably linked with our roles as a partner, a parent, a child, or a friend. When that role is challenged, our ego feels that its very existence is under attack. Our closest relationships are governed by a vast, unwritten library of expectations. We have detailed scripts in our heads for how our loved ones should behave, what they should say, and how they should treat us. When they deviate from this script, when they forget an important date, fail to read our minds, or act in a way that feels unsupportive, the ego's alarm system, which we have come to know as anger, shrieks with a unique and personal intensity. Our default perspective is to see these moments as a problem. We think, my partner is so difficult, or my family drives me crazy. We see them as obstacles to our peace. The path of wisdom invites a radical and liberating reframe. It asks us to stop seeing these challenges as problems and to start seeing them as practices. It asks us to transform our perception of our home from a potential battlefield into a sacred dojo. A dojo is a training hall where a martial artist goes to build strength, learn new skills, and face challenges in a contained environment in order to become stronger and more resilient. What if every interaction with your loved ones was seen in this light? That annoying habit your partner has is no longer just an annoyance. It is a custom-designed opportunity for you to practice patience. That unsolicited advice from your mother is no longer just a criticism. It is a chance to observe your own ego's defensiveness. That disagreement over finances is no longer just a fight. It is a real-time workshop for practicing right speech and deep listening. When we adopt this perspective, the entire dynamic shifts. We move from a state of blame to a state of curiosity. The question is no longer, what is wrong with you, but what is this situation revealing in me? The other person is no longer your adversary. They are your sparring partner, helping you to see your own weak spots, your own unhealed wounds, and your own reactive patterns. Their actions become a mirror, reflecting back to you the parts of yourself that still need attention and compassion. With this new frame, we can begin to consciously apply the entire toolkit we have been assembling. When your partner says something that stings the first arrow, can you pause and simply be with the sensation of hurt without immediately firing the second arrow of the story? You always criticize me. You don't love me. When your child is having a tantrum, a storm of pure, unregulated emotion, can you look past the frustrating behavior and see their suffering? Can you see their tiny body overwhelmed with feelings it doesn't understand? And can you meet that chaos not with your own anger, but with the firm, calming anchor of your own regulated presence? When a friend cancels plans at the last minute, can you catch the automatic story of, my time isn't being respected, and intentionally write a new one? I hope everything is okay with them. They must have a good reason. This practice transforms conflict itself, an argument, which is normally a battle of two egos fighting to be right, can become a conscious, collaborative practice. Imagine a couple who find themselves having the same destructive fight over and over. It starts small, but quickly escalate, with raised voices and hurtful words, until they both retreat, wounded and resentful. The original issue unresolved. Now, imagine that couple makes a mindful agreement. They decide on a safe word, something neutral or even silly, like hedgehog or Tuesday. They agree that the moment the argument begins to escalate, the moment they feel themselves losing control, either one of them can say the safe word. The rule is absolute when the word is spoken. The conversation must stop immediately. No one last point. No final sarcastic shot. They agree to separate for 10 minutes, not to stew in their anger or build their case, but with the sole intention of calming their own nervous systems, to practice some deep breathing, to do some grounding, to get a glass of water. After the 10 minutes are up, they come back together and try to approach the topic again, this time from a place of greater calm and clarity. This is not a technique for avoiding conflict. It is a technique for making conflict sane and productive. It is the S-T-O-P practice turned into a team sport. It acknowledges that in the heat of the moment, our higher brains go offline, and we are not capable of resolution. It builds a pause, a sacred space, directly into the structure of the disagreement. It turns the argument from a battle to be won into a mutual problem to be understood. This practice can save relationships because it replaces the habit of unconscious escalation with a shared commitment to conscious communication. Our relationships are the fire that will test us most profoundly. This fire can either consume us in endless cycles of anger and blame, or it can be the fire of a blacksmith's forge, tempering us, burning away our impurities and shaping us into beings of greater strength, flexibility, and compassion. Every interaction, especially the difficult ones, is an invitation to practice. Every misunderstanding is a chance to listen more deeply. Every moment of friction is an opportunity to choose love over being right. By embracing our relationships as our most sacred dojo, we find that the path to enlightenment is not a solitary journey up a distant mountain, but a path we walk hand in hand with the people we love, right here in the beautiful, messy, and sacred reality of our own lives. And as we look closely at this self that shows up in our dojo, this self that gets defensive, that feels hurt, that has so many expectations, a deeper and more profound question begins to emerge. Who or what is this I that is getting so angry in the first place? We have brought our practice into the most sacred and challenging of spaces, our relationships. We have learned to see them not as a source of conflict, but as a dojo, a training ground where our reactions, our expectations, and our deepest attachments are brought into the light. In this dojo, we come face to face with the self that gets defensive, the I that feels wounded, the me that holds onto grievances. We have spent this entire journey learning to soothe this self, to manage its anger, to rewrite its stories. Now, we arrive at the most profound, most radical, and most liberating inquiry of all. We must gently turn our gaze upon this self and ask the ultimate question: who or what is it that is actually angry? Our ordinary, everyday experience is that of being a solid, continuous self. It feels as though there is a little person inside our head, a CEO in the control room, who has been there since birth and will be there until death. This I is the thinker of our thoughts, the feeler of our feelings, the hero of our life story. We believe the me who feels angry today is the same me who was happy yesterday, and the same me who was a child 20 years ago. This belief in a solid, separate, and enduring self is the bedrock of our entire psychological world. It is also the fundamental root of our suffering, because if there is a solid me, then this me can be threatened. It can be insulted. It can be wounded, and it must be defended at all costs. The wisdom of Buddhism offers a revolutionary perspective. It invites us to investigate this self, not with a sledgehammer, but with the gentle, precise tools of mindful inquiry. When we do, we discover something remarkable. We find that what we call the self is not a solid entity at all. It is a process. It is a dynamic, shimmering, ever-changing bundle of interacting phenomena. In Buddhist psychology, these are called the 5 aggregates, or skendhes. We can think of them as 5 flowing streams that, when they come together, create the illusion of a single, solid thing called me. The first stream is form our physical body. But is the body a solid, unchanging thing? Science tells us it is a collection of trillions of cells that are constantly dying and being replaced. The body you have today is not the same body you had 7 years ago. It is a continuous process of change. The second stream is feeling. This refers to the constant flow of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral tones that color our experience. One moment we feel happy, the next sad, the next bored. These feelings are as fleeting as the weather, arising and passing away in every moment. The third stream is perception. This is the mind's function of labeling and recognizing. We see a shape, and our perception labels it tree. We hear a sound and label it car. These labels are also constantly shifting based on our focus and conditioning. The fourth stream is mental formations. This is the vast, chaotic river of our thoughts, our ideas, our memories, our opinions, our plans, our habits, and our intentions. This stream never stops moving, with one thought dissolving to make way for the next. The fifth stream is consciousness. This is the raw capacity of awareness itself, the light that illuminates all the other streams. It is the knowing quality that allows us to see, hear, feel, and think. The profound insight is this: the self is not a sixth thing standing behind these five streams, directing them. The self is simply the name we give to the temporary confluence of these five processes. It is like the word wave. A wave is not separate from the ocean. It is simply a temporary activity of the ocean. In the same way, the self is not separate from the processes of body, feeling, perception, thought, and consciousness. It is simply a temporary activity of them. With this understanding, we can now return to our question, who is angry? When the feeling of anger arises, instead of automatically saying I am angry, we can begin a gentle investigation. Is my body angry? Well, my body is just experiencing sensations of heat and tension. These are just physical energies, constantly changing. They are not a me. Is my feeling of displeasure angry? A feeling is just a fleeting event, like a cloud in the sky. It is not a solid self. Are my thoughts angry? The thoughts might be saying, this is outrageous, but thoughts are just sounds in the head, appearing and disappearing. They are not a self. Is my consciousness angry? Consciousness is just the light of awareness. It is colorless, like a mirror that simply reflects whatever appears before it. As we look for the angry self, we cannot find it. The search itself reveals that there is no solid, fixed entity to be angry. There is no core me that has been offended. This investigation is like peeling an onion to find the core. You peel layer after layer, but when you get to the end, there is nothing there. The onion was nothing but its layers. The self is nothing but its ever-changing layers of experience. When we truly begin to grasp this, the entire structure of anger collapses. An insult is like an arrow. For an arrow to do any damage, it must hit a target. The ego, our belief in a solid, vulnerable self, is the target we offer up to the world. When we see through the illusion of this target, the arrow has nowhere to land. It simply passes through the empty space of our awareness. A beautiful metaphor for this is a flowing river. We look at a river and give it a name. Like the Nile or the Amazon, it appears to be a single, enduring entity, but the reality is that the river is a process of constant change. The water you see in this moment is not the same water that was there a second ago. The banks are subtly shifting. The currents are rearranging the silt on the bottom. The great philosopher Heraclitus said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man." The self is this river. We have a name and an appearance of continuity, but we are a ceaseless flow of new thoughts, new feelings, new sensations, new moments of awareness. When anger arises, if you believe you are a small, stagnant pond, then the anger is like a poison that is dumped into you. It pollutes the entire pond. and there is nowhere for it to go. It becomes toxic, defining your entire being. But if you have the wisdom to know that you are a vast, flowing river, then the anger is just some pollutant tossed into the current. It is immediately caught up in the powerful flow of your ever-changing experience. It is diluted, carried along, and eventually washed out to the great ocean of what is. It doesn't define you because you are not a fixed thing to be defined. You are the flow itself. This realization transforms my anger into simply anger. It ceases to be a personal character flaw and becomes an impersonal energy arising in the field of awareness. We can observe it with a cool, scientific curiosity. The energy of anger is present. How interesting. It has a quality of heat. It makes the heart beat faster. It creates a narrative of blame. We are no longer the victim of this energy. We are the spacious, open awareness in which this energy is allowed to arise and, naturally, to pass away. This is the ultimate freedom. It is not a denial of our existence, but a radical expansion of it. We are freed from the cramped, dark, and fragile prison of a fixed identity and are invited to rest in the boundless, luminous, and indestructible nature of pure awareness. This insight, however, is not something that can be achieved through force of will. It is a deep truth that must be allowed to ripen within us. It requires a certain quality of heart and mind, a gentle strength that allows us to be with ourselves and our experiences without needing to rush or fix them. This quality, so essential for this deep work, is the profound strength of patience. We have taken a courageous look into the very nature of the self, that ephemeral, ever-changing process we call I. We have seen that by questioning who it is that is angry, the solid ground beneath our anger begins to dissolve, leaving only the empty space of awareness. This is perhaps the most profound insight on the path to freedom. But this is not an intellectual trick. It is not an idea we can simply grasp and be instantly liberated. It is a realization that must be allowed to ripen, to seep into the very marrow of our being over time. The journey from a theoretical understanding of non-self to a lived, embodied experience of it requires a foundational quality, a virtue that our fast-paced, results-driven world often dismisses as weakness or passivity. This is the quiet, unshakable, and formidable strength of patience. When we think of patience, we often conjure an image of gritting our teeth and passively enduring something unpleasant. We picture ourselves stuck in a long line, drumming our fingers, our bodies tense with suppressed frustration. We are not acting on our impatience, but we are boiling inside. This is not patience. This is simply anger on a leash. True patience, known in the Buddhist tradition as kshanti, is not a state of passive waiting. It is an active and powerful state of mind. It is the capacity to keep your heart and mind steady, open, and clear, even when faced with difficult, unpleasant, or unresolved conditions. It is the courage to be with the discomfort of the present moment without needing to immediately react, fix, or escape. It is not weakness. It is a display of immense inner strength. We can cultivate this powerful quality in 3 essential arenas of our lives. The first is patience with others. We are surrounded by people who do not act the way our ego wants them to. They are late. They are inefficient. They have different opinions. They make mistakes. Our impatient, Reactive mind wants to correct them, to push them, to force them to conform to our expectations. Patience with others is rooted in the compassionate understanding that every person is living a life as complex and challenging as our own. They are on their own unique timeline of growth and understanding. To be impatient with them is like trying to force a rosebud to bloom by prying its petals open with your fingers. You will not get a beautiful flower. You will only get a torn and broken thing. Patience creates the space for people to be who they are, and for natural change to unfold in its own time. It is a gift of grace we offer not only to them, but to ourselves, as it frees us from the exhausting job of trying to control the world. The second, and perhaps most crucial, arena is patience with ourselves. When we embark on a path of practice like this, we will inevitably stumble. We will forget to be mindful. We will get hooked by an old story. We will lose our temper. In these moments, the voice of the inner critic, the ego, will be quick to condemn us. It will say, "See, you failed. You're no good at this. You haven't changed at all." This is a critical juncture. To react to this voice with frustration is to shoot a second arrow at ourselves. Patience is the antidote. It is the practice of radical self-compassion. It is the ability to look at our stumbles not as failures, but as learning opportunities. It is the gentle inner voice that says, "Okay, I reacted. That's interesting information. Let's begin again." With kindness, patience with ourselves means we understand that this is a practice, not a performance. We are training a wild mind, and like training any animal, it requires consistency, gentleness, and an infinite willingness to begin again, and again, and again. The third, and most profound, arena is patience with life itself. We live with an illusion of control. We want what we want, and we want it now. We want the promotion. We want the resolution to the conflict. We want our wound to heal, and we want it on our schedule. But life operates on its own vast, mysterious timeline. A seed, once planted, needs time to germinate in the darkness of the soil. A deep wound, whether physical or emotional, needs time to mend. A complex problem needs time for its solution to ripen. To rage against this natural unfolding is to create immense and unnecessary suffering for ourselves. It is like shouting at the winter to become spring. Patience with life is a form of deep trust. It is the wisdom to do what we can in the present moment, to plant the seed, to tend the wound, to take the next wise step, and then to let go, allowing the larger process to unfold as it will in it. In the ancient lore of the Buddha's previous lives, there is a powerful and extreme story that illustrates the invincible nature of a mind perfected in patience. In one life, the being who would become the Buddha was a sage living in the forest, teaching a doctrine of forbearance and non-harming. One day, an arrogant and jealous king came to the forest to hunt, accompanied by his entire court, including the women of his harem. While the king slept, the women grew bored and wandered off, eventually finding the Serene sage. They were so captivated by his presence and his peaceful teachings that they sat and listened for hours. The king awoke to find his harem gone. In a fit of jealous rage, he tracked them down and found them seated at the feet of the sage, blinded by fury. The king stormed up to the sage and demanded, "What is this doctrine that you teach?" The sage replied calmly, "I teach patience, Your Majesty." The king sneered, "We will see about this patience." He then ordered his royal executioner to take a sword and, one by one, to cut off the sage's hands, his feet, his ears, and his nose. After each horrific act of mutilation, the king would mockingly ask, "Are you still patient? Where is your patience now, throughout this unimaginable ordeal?" The sage's mind remained completely undisturbed. He felt no anger, no hatred, no trace of ill will toward the king. He felt only a profound compassion for this man who was so lost in his own rage that he was creating a terrible destiny for himself. The story tells that the sage's final thoughts were a wish for the king's well-being. This is the absolute power of Kshanti. It is not a fragile shield. It is an indestructible field of peace that no external circumstance, no matter how terrible, can penetrate. We build this kind of inner strength not through a single act of will, but through the patient accumulation of small moments of practice. We are building an unshakable mountain within ourselves. Every time you choose not to honk your horn at a slow driver, you are adding a stone to the foundation of your mountain. Every time you listen fully to a loved one without interrupting, you are adding a layer of firm soil. Every time you meet your own inner critic with a breath of self-compassion, you are making that mountain more solid, more stable. The winds of life, the insults, the provocations, the frustrations, the delays will never stop blowing. If our inner structure is flimsy and weak, we will be rattled and shaken by every gust. But if we have patiently built our inner mountain, the winds simply blow past. The mountain remains. It is steady, grounded, and at peace. Not because the weather is calm, but because its own nature is one of profound stability. This patience is the quiet, steady bedrock upon which all of our other practices rest. It is the deep, silent strength that allows us to persist when the path is difficult, to understand when our minds are confused, and to find peace not by demanding that the world conform to our will, but by developing an unshakable center within ourselves. With this foundation of patience, and with the rich toolkit of wisdom we have now gathered, we are ready for the next step. We are ready to move from simply managing the inner world to consciously constructing it. We are ready to build our own inner sanctuary, a place of refuge and beauty that we can return to no matter how fierce the outer storms may be. We have stood upon the unshakable mountain of patience, finding within ourselves a quiet, resilient strength that can withstand the winds of provocation and the slow erosion of time. With this firm ground beneath our feet, and with a full toolkit of wisdom at our disposal, we are now ready to embark on our most creative and lasting work. We are ready to shift from being a firefighter, constantly battling the blazes of anger, to becoming a conscious architect, designing and building a beautiful and enduring sanctuary within our own heart. This is the practice of constructing your inner monastery, a place of refuge so profound and so personal that no external chaos can ever touch it. We live in a world that teaches us to search for peace outside of ourselves. We seek it in a quieter neighborhood, a less stressful job, a more understanding partner, or a remote vacation destination. While these external changes can bring temporary relief, they are ultimately fleeting. The world will always be noisy. Life will always be unpredictable. Lasting peace is not a place you can travel to. It is a structure you must build within your own mind. It is not something you find, it is something you create. The practices we have been exploring are the blueprints and the building materials for this sacred construction project. This is not just a beautiful metaphor, it is a neurological reality. The science of neuroplasticity has shown us that our brain is not a fixed, static organ. It is constantly being shaped and rewired by our experiences, our thoughts, and our focus. Every time you indulge in a reactive anger loop, rehearsing your grievances and justifications, you are strengthening the neural pathways of anger. You are paving a multi-lane superhighway in your brain that leads directly to suffering, making it easier and faster to get there next time. Your brain becomes highly efficient at being angry, but the opposite is also true. Every time you consciously choose to practice, you are laying down new pathways. You are forging new roads that lead to peace, clarity, and compassion. Every time you bring your attention to your anchor of the breath, you are laying another smooth, cool paving stone on a path of calm. Every time you question a negative story, you are clearing away the thorny weeds of distortion. Every time you practice right speech, you are building a strong, graceful fence around your property. Every time you feel the warmth of loving kindness, you are planting a fragrant garden that fills the air with sweetness. This is a slow, steady, and cumulative process. You are not building a temporary shelter. You are building a great cathedral of the spirit. Stone by stone, breath by breath. What does this inner monastery look like? Imagine it now. At its entrance are the 4 gates of speech, ensuring that the words that leave this sacred space are true, kind, necessary, and spoken at the right time. They also act as a filter for what you take in, allowing you to hear the words of others without immediately absorbing their negativity. Once inside, you find yourself in a vast, open courtyard. This is the space of your mindful awareness. Here, you can watch the weather of your mind, the clouds of thought, the winds of emotion come and go without being swept away. You can feel the sun of joy and the rain of sadness, recognizing both as temporary and natural phenomena within the boundless sky of your consciousness. At the heart of the monastery is the main meditation hall. This is the sanctuary of deep stillness, the place of your unshakable mountain. The foundation is built of patience, and its central pillar is your anchor, the breath. This is where you come to reconnect with your deepest strength, to find your center when the world outside is in turmoil. It is a place of profound silence and stability. Surrounding the main hall is a lush and beautiful garden. This is the garden of metta, or loving kindness. Here, you tend to the flowers of compassion for yourself and for all other beings. When your mind feels hard or brittle, you come to this garden to feel the soft earth, to water the plants of goodwill, and to remember your fundamental connection to all of life. And in a quiet corner of the monastery, there is a library. This library contains all the books of wisdom you have gathered on your journey. One volume contains the teaching of the 2 arrows, reminding you how not to cause your own suffering. Another holds the story of the unaccepted gift. Another details the nature of the ego, while another explains the liberating truth of impermanence. You can enter this library at any time to consult these teachings, to remind yourself of the path, and to clarify your understanding. This inner monastery is not a fantasy. It is the tangible result of dedicated practice. It is the new structure of your mind. The beauty of this sanctuary is that it is completely portable. You don't have to retreat from the world to find it. You can access it in a single breath. When you are stuck in a traffic jam, you can close the gates to harsh speech and rest in the silent courtyard of awareness. When you are in a tense meeting, you can feel the foundation of your meditation hall, your unshakable mountain. When you feel hurt by a loved one, you can step into the garden of metta and find a balm of compassion for both them and yourself. This inner monastery becomes your true home. It is the source of your peace, your clarity, and your strength, a refuge that can never be taken away from you. Think of your mind as a deep mountain lake. An untrained mind is often murky. Its silt and mud constantly stirred up by the winds of reactivity. When the water is muddy, you cannot see clearly. The reflections on the surface are distorted and confusing. You mistake a floating log for a monster. You cannot see the ground beneath you. An agitated mind lives in a state of distorted confusion. The practice of building your inner monastery is the process of allowing all that mud and silt to gently settle. It is not about stopping the wind from ever blowing. That is impossible. The winds of life, the triggers and challenges, will always come. The practice is about cultivating such a deep, profound stillness at the bottom of the lake that even when the surface is rippled by the wind, the depths remain clear and undisturbed. And because the depths are so still, the surface itself settles back to a state of mirror-like clarity much more quickly once the wind subsides. From this place of inner clarity, you can reflect the world as it truly is, without the distortions of your own anger, fear, and ego. You can see the path ahead. You can respond to life's challenges with wisdom, grace, and an unshakable sense of peace. This sanctuary is your greatest creation, a testament to the power of your own awareness. We have journeyed from being a helpless victim of anger to becoming the conscious architect of our own inner peace. The final step is to integrate this new reality fully, to learn to live from this sanctuary in every moment, and in doing so, to become a true alchemist of the heart, capable of transforming any situation into an opportunity for wisdom. We have come to the end of a long and transformative journey. We began as unwilling victims of a fiery, unpredictable force, tossed about by the storms of our own reactivity. We have traveled inward, mapping the landscape of our anger, finding our anchor in the breath, building an unshakable mountain of patience, and constructing a sacred monastery within our own minds. We have learned the skills of a warrior, a diplomat, a gardener, and an architect of the spirit. Now, we must integrate all of these roles into our final and most powerful identity. We must become the alchemist of the heart. The ancient and mystical art of alchemy was, on its surface, about a physical process, the transmutation of base, common metals like lead into the most precious of all substances, pure gold. The alchemist's workshop was a place of fire and mystery, of strange vessels and cryptic formulas. But the true alchemists knew that their work was not merely external. The transformation of lead into gold was a powerful metaphor for the ultimate spiritual journey, the transformation of the base, heavy and toxic aspects of the human experience into the radiant, luminous, and incorruptible gold of enlightened consciousness. We are now standing in our own workshop. The base metal, the lead we have been given to work with, is anger, And the gold we seek is the unshakable peace and boundless compassion of a liberated heart. The first and most profound shift in becoming this alchemist is a complete reorientation to your own difficulties. Before this journey, an outburst of anger, a surge of irritation, or a confrontation with a difficult person was seen as a failure, a problem, a step backward on your path. It was a moment to be regretted, a sign that you were not good enough at being peaceful. The alchemist sees it differently. The alchemist knows that you cannot make gold without lead. The lead is not a problem. It is the essential raw material. And so, when the familiar heat of anger arises, the alchemist's heart does not sink in despair. Instead, a quiet, knowing part of them whispers, "Ah, here it is, the very substance I need for my great work. Thank you." Every moment of anger is no longer a catastrophe. It becomes a precious, golden opportunity. With this new perspective, the entire toolkit we have assembled becomes the alchemist's precise set of instructions. The sacred formula for transmutation. The alchemical process begins with purification. When the raw lead of a situation is presented an insult, a frustration, we first purify our perception. We apply the wisdom of the unaccepted gift. Refusing to take ownership of the negativity, we apply the wisdom of compassion, seeing the suffering in the other person, which cleanses the lead of its personal sting. We are no longer working with my personal, justified anger, but with the impersonal, objective energy of a difficult moment. Next, the alchemist must dissolve the solid lead into its fundamental components. This is the practice of mapping the body. We dissolve the big, monolithic monster of anger into its constituent parts: heat, pressure, tension, a rapid heartbeat. By breaking it down into these fluid, energetic sensations, we see that it is not a solid, threatening thing. We also use the wisdom of rewriting the script to dissolve the hard, rigid stories and cognitive distortions that gave the anger its apparent solidity and power. We dissolve the illusion of the solid, permanent self, realizing that there is no fixed target for the anger to cling to. The lead begins to lose its shape and become malleable. Then comes the crucial stage of separation. The alchemist must separate the pure essence from the dross. We achieve this with our anchor, the breath, and the sacred pause it creates. In this space, we separate the raw data of the first arrow from our own self-inflicted suffering of the second arrow. We separate the objective event from our subjective, story-laden reaction. We skillfully use our S-T-O-P protocol to stand back and see what is truly happening, separating the signal from the noise. Now, we arrive at the heart of the great work: conjunction, the joining of opposites to create a new substance. Here, we bring the cool, clarifying water of our wisdom practices to the hot fire of the raw emotional energy. We join our strength with our vulnerability, our boundaries with our compassion. We bring the focus of our inner monastery to the chaos of the outer world. We use the fire of the moment not to destroy, but to power a positive transformation, channeling the energy through the clarifying lens of right speech and wise action. Finally, the alchemist achieves fermentation and coagulation, where the transformed substance crystallizes into its final, golden form. This is what happens when we consistently practice the golden state of peace, clarity, and compassion becomes our new default. It is no longer something we have to strive for in a crisis. It is our very nature, our new emotional home. The gold is stable. It does not rust or tarnish. A mind that has been transformed by these practices finds a peace that is not dependent on external conditions. The most beautiful secret of this alchemy is revealed in the end. It is the realization that the lead and the gold were never truly separate substances. They were always made of the same fundamental energy. The only thing that changed was its form. Is expression. This is the wisdom of the lotus flower. The lotus is one of the most sublime symbols of purity, beauty, and enlightenment. Yet, it does not grow in a sterile, pristine environment. It does not grow in clean sand or pure water. The lotus requires thick, dark, nutrient-rich mud to grow. It sinks its roots deep into the muck and the mire, and from that darkness, it sends a stalk up toward the light, finally blossoming into a flower of breathtaking beauty, untouched and unstained by the mud from which it arose. The mud is our anger, our fear, our jealousy, our suffering. It is the messy, difficult, painful stuff of human life. For years, we may have tried to escape the mud, to deny it, to pretend we are not rooted in it. But the spiritual alchemist understands the truth. The mud is not the obstacle, it is the nourishment. Our anger is not the enemy of our peace. It is the raw fuel for our liberation. Every difficulty, every challenge, every moment of suffering is the mud that allows the lotus of our wisdom to bloom. You are this alchemist. You are this lotus. You have the full capacity to take the lead of your most difficult moments and transform it into the gold of unshakable peace. You have the ability to root yourself in the mud of your own humanity and produce a flower of profound beauty and compassion. This is not a distant dream. It is the real and tangible possibility of every single moment. The world will continue to offer you its mud, its lead, its challenges. Your journey now is to greet each one not with fear or despair, but with the quiet, confident wisdom of a master craftsperson, ready to perform the sacred and beautiful alchemy of the heart. We have now traveled the full arc of a profound journey together. We began in the disorienting heat of a fire, feeling like prisoners of a storm, tossed about by the volatile weather of our own minds. We felt hijacked by the red mist of rage, puppets pulled by the strings of external events and internal conditioning. On our path, we have gathered the most precious of tools. We learned the simple power of refusing an unwholesome gift, of mapping the physical landscape of our emotions, and of finding an unshakable anchor in the simple rhythm of our breath. We discovered the sacred space that lies between a trigger and our reaction, and in that space, we found our freedom. We have unmasked the ego, rewritten our painful stories, and tended the beautiful inner garden of loving kindness. We have stood on the mountain of patience, built a monastery in our own hearts, and finally, taken our seat in the alchemist's workshop, ready to transform the lead of any difficulty into the gold of wisdom. And so we arrive at the essential, liberating truth that has been waiting for us at the end of this path. Peace is not a fragile truce with the world. It is not the absence of difficult people, frustrating situations, or unexpected challenges. Peace is not a destination. You arrive at once, all your problems have been solved. Peace is an inner skill. It is a quality of being that you cultivate, a sanctuary you build within yourself. Stone by stone, breath by breath. The goal of this entire journey has not been to create a life where you never again feel the spark of anger. That would be an inhuman and impossible goal. Anger, as a fleeting energy, will still come to knock on your door. It is a natural human response to perceived threats or injustice. The profound difference lies in how you now greet this visitor. Before, when anger knocked, you would fling the door open and let it storm into your house, letting it smash the furniture, terrorize the inhabitants, and set fire to the curtains. Now, you have a choice. You can hear the knock, walk calmly to the door, and open it just a crack. You can look at the visitor and say, with a calm, clear recognition, I see you are here. You can acknowledge its presence without inviting it in. You can feel its fiery energy without being consumed by it. And then, you can gently close the door and return to the peace of your inner home, allowing the visitor to continue on its way. You have not suppressed it, and you have not been ruled by it. You have simply met it with the power of your awareness. This is the heart of the practice. The journey does not end here. There is no certificate of graduation, no final mastery. There is only the ongoing, moment-to-moment practice of waking up to your own life. You have within you, right now, everything you need. You have the anchor of your breath, the space of your awareness, and the wisdom of your own compassionate heart. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. Some days the practice will feel easy and spacious. Other days, you will get caught. You will forget, and you will find yourself holding a hot coal once more. In those moments, there is no need for judgment. There is only the gentle invitation to begin again. That is the whole of the path to simply and kindly begin again. The power to transform your relationship with anger, and therefore to transform your life, does not reside in this script or in any teacher. It resides in you. The path is here. The time is now. The journey continues with your very next breath.